Story 1. Sister chooses grandpa over our dad to walk her down the aisle at her wedding, after years of neglect from both our parents. I am 35 years old with 2 siblings. My sister is 29, and my brother is 23. Our parents are extremely religious and conservative. Growing up, our parents cared very much about their image in society. They always wanted a son and were extremely disappointed when my sister and I were born. Being their first child, when they found out that I was a girl before I was born, they contemplated not having me, but because they are religious, they decided to go through with the pregnancy. My grandmother has told me that when I was just 2 years old, my mother sent me away to stay with her as she was depressed having me around. Growing up with my grandparents was amazing. My grandpa patiently taught me how to ride a bike. I still remember the thrill of pedaling on my own for the first time. Those bike riding days created a strong bond between us that lasted a long time. My grandma taught me all about gardening. I learned how to take care of plants, see flowers bloom, and enjoy having a little piece of nature. The skills she shared during those gardening days still help me today. Throughout all this, my parents never once came to visit me until I turned 7 years old and people started questioning them about why I wasn't staying with them. They dragged me back from my grandparents to stay with them, despite my protests. I would have loved to continue to stay with my grandparents, as they brought stability and warmth into my life. After 3 years, my parents were over the moon to learn they were expecting another child. However, when they found out it was going to be another girl, they were disappointed again. Surprisingly, though, they were a bit more relaxed about it compared to when I was on the way. Thankfully, my sister didn't have to go through what I did, and she stayed with our parents growing up. The differences in the way my parents treated me and my sister were quite noticeable. For instance, I was expected to help my mother out with a lot of household chores and responsibilities. It felt like a never-ending list of tasks that I had to complete to meet their expectations. However, when it came to my sister, the rules seemed to be a bit more relaxed. She didn't have the same level of pressure, and my parents were more lenient with her chores. It was like they had learned from their earlier parenting experiences and decided to take a different approach with her. Another example was the way they handled our education. When I was in school, there was immense pressure on me to excel in every subject. My parents had high expectations, and any deviation from top grades was met with disappointment. They enrolled me in various extracurricular activities, pushing me to be the best in everything. On the contrary, when my sister started school, the atmosphere was significantly more relaxed. While they still cared about her education, the level of intensity was not the same. They allowed her to explore her interests at her own pace and didn't enforce the same strict rules that I had experienced. The most striking difference, however, was in the way they celebrated achievements. When I achieved something notable, it was often met with a nod of approval or a brief acknowledgement. In contrast, when my sister accomplished something, the whole family celebrated as if it were a major milestone. These differences created a sense of confusion within me. I couldn't comprehend why the same parents could have such contrasting approaches to raising their children. It wasn't easy growing up in an environment where I felt constantly scrutinized while witnessing my sister enjoying a more carefree upbringing. However, I made a conscious effort not to harbor any resentment towards her, as I recognized that my sister wasn't responsible for the parenting decisions made by our parents. Despite these challenges, I remained committed to supporting my sister and being a positive influence in her life. In fact, we managed to maintain a good relationship and have always remained close. 6 years later, everything changed when my brother was born. My parents had a massive feast to celebrate the fact that they finally had a son. Since the day he was born, it was clear that he got special treatment. He had fancy clothes, expensive toys, and a super cool room that was way fancier than what my sister and I had. Our parents really went all out for him, buying the best baby gear, like top-notch strollers and an expensive crib. It wasn't just about stuff. Our little brother got way more attention too. Our parents took tons of pictures and videos of him hitting all his baby milestones, but when it came to my sister and me, there was never this much fuss. Even in everyday things, our parents were more involved with him. They never missed a doctor's appointment or a playdate, always there for him. For my sister and me, our grandparents played a bigger role in our lives after my brother was born. This unequal treatment didn't just stop with babyhood. It continued as my brother grew up, shaping the way our family worked and causing some challenges along the way. My brother was exempt from many household chores that my sister and I were expected to handle. Our parents often made allowances for him, excusing him from responsibilities that were an integral part of our daily routine. Birthdays and special occasions became grand celebrations for him, complete with elaborate parties and expensive presents. As you can imagine, this made my sister and me feel left out all the time. To be fair, I had gotten used to their treatment pretty much by this time, but this was the first time that my sister was experiencing what I had been through as a child. We started to spend a lot of our time in vacations at our grandparents' place, as we spent countless afternoons playing in their backyard or sitting by the fireplace listening to their stories. Our grandparents became our confidants. We shared all our fears, dreams, and the challenges we faced at home. My grandmother would always assure us that we were not alone. When I was a teenager, I was labeled as a rebel child by my parents because I openly had different political beliefs from my family. When I tried to explain my points of view, my mom would usually cry and tell me that I was stressing her out. If I ever expressed sadness or anger in front of her, my mom would get angry and tell me that she can't stand to be around me when I am like that and would then ignore me for the next few hours. As my sister got older, she began to become more of an individual and also developed some mental health issues. For years, my mom refused to get her treatment because, according to my mom, she didn't really need it yet. When my sister had panic attacks or anxiety, my mother would tell my sister that she was burdening her. There was this one night when things got really bad at home. My parents were going on and on about how my sister and I were such a disappointment and that we should have never been born. It felt like we were drowning in their harsh words, and we couldn't take it anymore. Feeling lost and hurt, my sister and I decided to leave home. We packed our bags and headed straight to our grandparents' house. Our parents found out we were at our grandparents' and showed up demanding us to come back home. My grandmother scolded them for treating us this way, and my dad replied that he provided us with food and a roof to live in, so what more could we want from him? Hearing this, our grandpa, who is usually very calm and composed, got really angry and raised his voice for the first time. He yelled at my father that he should be ashamed for treating his own children this way and threatened him that if he ever did anything to hurt us, he would call CPS on them. This really scared my parents as my brother was still young, and they were scared to lose custody of him too. Grandpa continued to defend us by insisting that we deserved better parents than them. I clearly remember him telling my mother that she was his daughter, yet he had never treated her this way, so how could she ever be cruel to my sister and me? My mother's face went red in embarrassment. That fight at our grandparents' place became a turning point, as this was the first time someone stood up for us, and it made all the difference. After that night at our grandparents' place, things kind of changed at home. Our parents, especially Dad, got a bit scared after what Grandpa had threatened him with, so they toned it down a bit. Our brother continued to get extra love, but the constant yelling and punishment for my sister and me got a bit less. When I turned 18, I really wanted to go to college, but my parents were super against it, so we had this massive fight. My mom went on about how, as a girl, I should just focus on getting married and having kids. She said guys wouldn't be into a woman with too much education. My dad joined in, making fun of what I would even do with more education. It was a real mess to hear my own parents discourage me from being independent based on my gender. Despite their protests, I went to a 4-year university right away. I had a scholarship due to getting selected for their honors program. This meant that my parents didn't have to pay anything for me. My parents got really angry at me for defying them, but I didn't care. I started to work part-time during college and save money during this time. Living alone in college was a game changer, teaching me the ropes of adulting and giving me a taste of the real world. Balancing books, a part-time job, and my personal life wasn't always a walk in the park, but it sure made me stronger and more self-reliant. Throughout all this, my parents rarely called to check up on me. Eventually, I graduated and got myself a full-time job. I had saved up enough money from my part-time job so I could move into a flat with roommates. My conversations with my parents became less and less, almost to the point of non-existent. It wasn't just me pulling away. They seemed content with the distance too. The occasional birthdays and holidays went by without much more than a generic greeting. There were times when life hit me hard, job struggles, relationship woes, and my instinct was to reach out to family, but each time I hesitated because I knew they would not care. The idea of going back to that emotional roller coaster with my parents was daunting. Soon, it became a conscious choice not to involve them in my life whatsoever. The only person in my family I remained in constant contact with was my sister. When it was her time to go to university, my parents threatened to kick her out if she pursued higher education under their roof, so I offered to take her in. I had to make sure she had the chance to follow her dreams without our parents holding her back. So my sister moved in with me and started attending a local community college. I worked tirelessly to provide for both of us. It wasn't always easy, but I was determined to support her education and help her achieve her goals. During this time, our bond grew stronger, and I found solace in knowing that despite the struggles with our parents, I could create a supportive and encouraging environment for my sister to thrive. When our brother grew up, he didn't face the same struggles as my sister and me. My parents were proud to send him to college. They had even saved up enough money to set up a college fund for him, ensuring he had the financial support needed to pursue higher education. Our brother clearly had opportunities and privileges that we never had, and I couldn't help but feel a mix of emotions. Happiness for him and a tinge of sadness for the stark contrast in how we were treated. Nonetheless, my sister and I continued to support each other, determined to overcome the challenges we had faced growing up. Throughout all the ups and downs, our grandparents remained a constant source of support for my sister and me over all these years. They stayed in touch with us, visiting us whenever they could. A few years ago, our beloved grandmother passed away, and my sister and I rushed home to be there for our grandfather. This reunion marked the first time I saw our parents after such a long time. They acknowledged my presence with a simple nod. Seeing their lack of warmth, I wanted to burst into tears, as I was already feeling vulnerable at that moment, but I didn't want my mother to scold me for making a scene. I remember after our grandmother's death, my sister and I spent more and more time with our grandfather. Despite our hectic schedules, we made a conscious effort to be there for him. We would visit him regularly, often sharing meals together or simply sitting on the porch engrossed in conversations that ranged from childhood tales to more recent happenings. On weekends, we dedicated entire afternoons to helping him with household chores or accompanying him to the local park. During one of our shared meals, my grandfather expressed his pride in me for taking care of my younger sister. His words caught me off guard, and I was genuinely surprised by his acknowledgement. He went on to say that having a granddaughter like me made him proud, and he believed I had the potential to change the world someday. Although I understood they were just words, an overwhelming wave of emotions hit me, and tears welled up in my eyes. It had been ages since someone had genuinely appreciated me. Grandpa, with a gentle pat on my head, assured me that my sister was fortunate to have an older sibling like me. The pride shining in his eyes is an image etched in my memory forever. Our brother, who has been the recipient of our parents' preferential treatment, has always maintained his distance, perhaps fearing that our parents would cut him off as they did to us. Over the last several years or so, my sister and I occasionally talk to him or catch wind from relatives or cousins about the numerous things that our parents have done for him while ignoring our existence, such as shelling out money for several used cars for my brother over the years. They paid for the deposit on a house so my brother could move out and live on his own. Last year, they paid for my brother to go to New York City with his girlfriend so he could relax, since, according to our parents, he is working too hard. Recently, my sister, who had been dating her college sweetheart, Robert, 29M, got engaged. The news filled me with immense joy, and I couldn't be happier for her. She and Robert make a wonderful couple, and the love they share is evident in every smile and glance they exchange. The proposal was nothing short of magical, and my sister was on cloud nine, showcasing the beautiful ring that adorned her finger to anyone who would spare a moment to share in her happiness. She had put up pictures of her proposal on social media, which is how my relatives found out and called to congratulate her. The news must have eventually traveled to our parents. Our phones started buzzing like crazy with calls and texts from our parents. It was honestly surprising because, up until now, they hadn't shown much interest in what was going on in our lives. It made us wonder why they were suddenly so eager to be part of our happiness when they kept their distance for so long. The messages brought a mix of feelings: shock, confusion, and maybe a bit of annoyance. Why now? Why did they decide to jump in just when we were having a happy moment? Caught off guard by this unexpected flood of attention, my sister and I exchanged puzzled looks. When my sister finally answered our mom's call, Mom went on about how thrilled she was to hear about the engagement. My sister, being polite, said her thank you. Then came the tricky part. Mom started asking all sorts of questions. She wanted to know who this Robert guy was and if they could meet him. Knowing our parents and their track record, my sister tried to dance around it, citing her hectic work schedule and the chaos of wedding planning. But my dad, probably sitting right there with Mom, jumped in. He insisted that they deserved to meet the guy she was planning to spend her life with. Their convincing game was strong, and my sister eventually gave in. My sister didn't want to face our parents alone, so she told them that she would bring me along for the meetup, and surprisingly, our parents agreed. It was a little unexpected, but we decided to roll with it. The day of the meeting arrived, and we nervously arrived at our parents' place to meet them. The atmosphere was tense from the get-go. Our parents greeted us with forced smiles, trying to act like everything was normal. Mom smiled more warmly at Robert, though, and we all sat down to talk. It was awkward to see our parents after so long, especially how they were trying to act like one happy family in front of Robert, although I am sure Robert knew the full story, seeing that he dated my sister through college and has been with her for such a long time. The tension in the air was palpable, and Robert, sensing the unease, tried to keep the conversation light. He shared a bit about himself, his job, and his interests, hoping to ease the awkwardness. Our conversation then steered towards my sister and Robert's upcoming wedding. Here's where things got more interesting. Our parents started to subtly hint about how wonderful it would be for Dad to walk my sister down the aisle and Mom to be an integral part of her ceremony as well. My sister and I looked at them in confusion. Dad continued to say how he wanted us to showcase a united front in front of our relatives to avoid any family embarrassment, and my mother nodded in agreement. She reiterated that they didn't want Robert's family to think that my sister didn't have any parents of her own. Hence, they wanted to be involved. Hearing their words, my sister and I looked at each other. It was clear now that they had called us here for their own agenda. They were afraid that my sister would not invite them to the wedding and didn't want their relatives to question them. It would harm their social status. I shook my head in disbelief, realizing their agenda. My sister gracefully thanked them for their suggestions but calmly asserted that she had already made up her mind about who was going to walk her down the aisle. My dad asked curiously who else she could have chosen for such an important role in her wedding. With a confident smile, my sister dropped the bombshell. Grandpa will be walking me down the aisle. Our parents seemed taken aback, struggling to conceal their surprise. Their expressions quickly shifted from anticipation to anger. They couldn't fathom that their daughter had chosen our grandfather over them for such a significant role. This is how the conversation pretty much went after that. Mom, but sweetheart, it's tradition for a father to walk his daughter down the aisle. You can't break tradition. Sister, well, Mom, I don't care about breaking traditions. I want Grandpa to be a part of this special moment. He's been there for us when you both forgot that you had daughters. You can only attend as a guest at the wedding, like any other relative. Dad, you can't just sideline us like this. We're your parents. Hearing this, I couldn't handle my laughter any longer and started laughing loudly. Everyone was quite startled at my reaction. I looked my dad square in the eyes and told him that he and Mom had forgotten how to be parents for us, treating us like garbage all those years, so they had no right to demand my sister listen to them. The truth hit hard, and our parents, angered and embarrassed, started to yell at my sister and me. They insisted that we were going to destroy their reputation, but we honestly didn't care. My sister stood her ground, telling them that they couldn't suddenly claim a parental role when they had neglected us for so long. I chimed in, expressing how their actions had consequences and they couldn't rewrite the past. She clarified that our parents would have a limited role at the wedding, just like any other guest. They were welcome to attend, but their involvement would be minimal. The meeting ended on a sour and tense note, with my sister standing firm in her decision. As we left, I couldn't help but feel a mix of admiration for my sister's courage and disappointment in our parents' inability to understand the consequences of their past actions. Since the meeting, we have been hounded by our parents and other relatives that we are being selfish and cruel for not allowing our dad to walk my sister down the aisle. I'd like to thank everyone for telling our parents the truth and supporting my sister's decision to let Grandpa walk her down the aisle. Update 1. It's been a few hours since I posted the story, and the support has been overwhelming. To everyone asking about our grandpa, my sister has informed him about the engagement and he has warmly congratulated her. He still doesn't know about my sister's idea to ask him to walk her down the aisle. We want to be there when we give him the news so we can see his face. We plan on going down to visit him this coming weekend. As for our parents, they have continued to send us several angry messages. Dad even found a way to reach out to Robert on Facebook, where he sent him a long message saying how he should knock some sense into my sister as the man in the relationship. He continued to write how my sister had no right to ask her grandpa when traditionally it's the dad who fills this role. He then threatened Robert that if he allowed my sister to go through with this, then he and Mom wouldn't attend their wedding. Robert simply responded, "My fiancée is going to do whatever she wants, and I stand by her. It's your choice to attend our wedding or not." The clarity and strength of Robert's response likely sent shock waves through our dad, who had probably expected a more submissive reaction. I can't help but picture the look on his face, and it makes me chuckle. I will update next when we go and meet our grandpa this weekend. Update 2. My sister and I drove down to our grandpa's place this weekend. We were bubbling with excitement to share the news with him. My sister finally told him that she had something important to tell him. He gazed at us, his eyes filled with curiosity and warmth. My sister took a deep breath and said, "I want you to walk me down the aisle on my big day. You're the one who has always been there for us, and I can't imagine anyone else doing it." Grandpa's eyes welled up with tears, and he pulled my sister into a tight hug. His voice choked with emotions as he said how honored he was that my sister had asked him. Looking at my grandpa getting teary-eyed, I teared up too, and we shared a group hug. Grandpa kept thanking my sister, saying how much it meant to him. We assured him that it was the least we could do to repay the love and support he had showered on us over the years. Then we explained how we had broken the news to our parents and the way they had reacted. We were worried that they might take their anger out on him, but Grandpa chuckled. He assured us that he could handle our mom and that nothing was going to stop him from walking my sister down the aisle. My sister sighed in relief, and we spent the evening helping our grandpa out around the house. As my sister's wedding day approaches, we have been knee-deep in planning, from choosing the perfect theme that reflects her personality to finalizing her wedding dress and meticulously arranging the seating for the guests. I can't wait to see my beautiful sister say "I do" to the love of her life very soon. Update 3. It's been 3 months since my last update. I am sorry for the late update, but I have been quite busy with my life. The wedding day arrived, and it turned out to be everything my sister had dreamt of and more. The venue looked stunning, as we had anticipated. The guests filled the seats, and an air of joy and anticipation surrounded us. There was a noticeable absence in the ceremony: our parents. In the wake of our decision to limit their role at the wedding, they chose not to attend, a decision we respected. It was a bittersweet moment, realizing that they were missing such a significant event in my sister's life. The ceremony itself was magical. My sister, radiant in her wedding dress, stood with Grandpa by her side. The love and pride in his eyes were palpable as they walked down the aisle together. The decision to have Grandpa play this pivotal role had been the right one, and the joy it brought to my sister was evident. The atmosphere was filled with warmth, laughter, and the shared happiness of everyone present. My sister and Robert exchanged vows, promising a lifetime of love and companionship. The celebration continued into the night with dancing, laughter, and heartfelt toasts. Life has been going smoothly for us since the wedding. My sister and I have made the conscious decision to block our parents so they can't reach out to us anymore with their negativity and drama. We still continue to regularly visit our grandpa whenever we can. The journey hasn't been easy, but as we move forward, the focus remains on building a life filled with positivity and surrounded by those who genuinely care. Hopefully, this is my last update. Now on to the next story. Story 2. Before we start, if you're enjoying this video so far, please consider liking and subscribing to the channel. Now let's continue. Overheard my fiancée telling her friends my money was the best part of me. So I humiliated her, and she trashed my house. Now I'm taking her to court and made sure she never gets a penny. I am 29 years old now, with an MBA and a very cushy position in my father's company. I know this makes me sound like some kind of snobby rich kid, but hear me out. Growing up, we really weren't doing well. We struggled a lot, and the family was in serious debt. I was young at the time, so I don't know every single detail, but my dad made a very risky loan using our house as collateral, the only thing of value that we owned, since it was his grandfather's house. That loan was what helped him start up his business, and despite a rocky start, things have gotten so good. It wasn't fun when it was happening, but looking back, I'm very grateful that I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth, because I personally think it made me more down to earth, and it also helped me appreciate the value of hard work. It was part of what inspired me to go out and get an MBA because I wanted to add value to what my father had built. So, as much as the son in his father's company makes me sound like an untalented brat benefiting from nepotism, I'll admit I am, to some degree, but I know I'm there on merit at the same time. I've worked hard, and I've put in my own effort to help the company grow. Because of this, my family is now pretty well off, and so am I. On a personal level, because of this, I've become very financially sensible since I know we haven't always had this money, so it's a big blessing. I've been very cautious when it comes to relationships because I personally feel that you have to make a lot of effort to find people who aren't shallow, and with my money, I think it is just a little bit tougher to know who is there for you and not your bank account. In my mid-20s, when things had really gone into full throttle, I dated a lot. I mean a lot. A lot of them didn't go past the first date. I'd probably say that I only went on a third date a handful of times. I could probably count the number on one hand. Anyway, it was about 2.5 years ago that I met someone, and honestly, she was gorgeous. I saw her smile, and I had to go and say hi to her. I found out that her name was Brianna, not her real name, for obvious reasons, and that she was a nurse. I think that made me find her even more attractive because it's a profession that I really respect. I asked her for her number right there, and that was how things between us started. I've always been very cautious in relationships, and when I start one, it's with the aim of going the distance. I always try to see whether I can see my wife in someone before I even take things seriously. I think that's why I always try to make sure that my money is, at most, a quarter of the reason someone is with me. It would be stupid for me to assume it doesn't make me more of a catch to women, but I don't want to find myself in a relationship with anyone who considers that to be the primary reason they're with me. I honestly didn't see any gold digger behavior with Brianna. She was smart, amazing to talk with, funny, and she just brought everything that I wanted to the table. So, 2 years and some months after we met, I popped the question to her and she said yes. As we speak, Brianna is my fiancée, and it made me extremely happy when she agreed to spend the rest of her life with me. Now I'm getting to the point of this whole thing, but before I get there, there was one major event that sort of soured me, and I think it is worth mentioning here. Obviously, she got to know more about the full extent of my family's finances when we got closer and closer. She knew my family wasn't poor, and we were doing very well. So, a few months after the proposal, I brought up the idea of a prenup to her. Honestly, it seemed like a very reasonable discussion to have, but she apparently didn't think so. She flipped out at me. According to her, me suggesting a prenup to her was bad in 2 ways. The first was that it seemed to her that I didn't believe that our relationship was going to go the distance. Obviously that's not the case, but even if I do 110% in the marriage, if she wakes up one day and decides she's done, I can't do anything about that. The second reason was that it meant that I didn't trust her not to try and rob me blind in the event that things didn't work out how we wanted. That's the summary of it, but we ended up going back and forth for a full hour, going to sleep mad at each other. After spending the entire night deliberating about it, I let her know that it wasn't going to be necessary. Yes, I know that was very stupid, but I love her immensely, so I chose to let it slide because I didn't want the prenup to be the reason why we fell apart. Things got better between us quite soon after all of that. Now, this is the point where I really need third parties to tell me what to do. One of my fiancé's colleagues was having a barbecue, and she invited me to go along with her. I decided it would be a good chance for me to meet some of the people she worked with, since she mentioned them pretty frequently. When I got there, everyone was nice to me, and it was a good time, honestly. I met a bunch of the nurses who worked alongside her on most shifts as well. At one point, I was outside chatting about sports and stocks with a man. I knew she was inside gossiping with her girls, which was fine. At a point, I needed to go take a piss, so I headed back into the house through the back door. Now, I don't know how to describe it, but the back door led into a hallway which ended in the living room. Standing at the back door, you wouldn't be able to see anyone sitting in the living room, at least not until you turned the corner. It was as I was heading to the bathroom that I heard my fiancé's voice and some others, and from the first sentence, it was so clear that I was the topic of conversation. It started with them talking about how well I dress, but that seemed to naturally transition into how expensively I dress. Then my money came up. The girls were talking about how lucky she was to get someone with money. A lot of chirping and giggling, and then I heard my fiancé say something that felt like a punch to the gut. He has a lot of money, and honestly, his money is the best part of him by far. That was followed by a lot of giggling and laughing. She even added, he asked for a prenup. I said no, of course. I have to be able to cash out if things hit the rocks. Then there was a lot more laughing. At that point, I left and went back out of the house. I honestly didn't find myself needing to use the bathroom anymore. We went back home, and she noticed something was up with me, but I didn't tell her what it was until she went to bed. This happened a few days ago, and at this point, I don't know what to do. She's a great person and I love her a lot, but I'm fighting a battle with myself trying to figure out whether I should let it pass. A stupid female gaffe that she was leaning a bit too far into, or whether this is worth canceling everything that we've planned towards the wedding and kicking her out of the house. Honestly, I don't know what to do. My mind is telling me to end things because this was exactly what I never wanted. Somebody who values my money way too much. A few days ago, she was the perfect woman for me, and I hate how quickly that all changed. My heart is telling me to talk about it, but I honestly can't figure it out. I appreciate all and any advice. Edit 1. I'm seeing a lot of people saying that I never should have compromised on the prenup and I should have just ended things right there. A lot of you said it in unnecessarily harsh ways, but I've got thick skin. If I had another chance, I might not have done things differently, but I do agree that I would give someone else the same advice a lot of you are giving me here. I should have actually stood my ground on that because, even if I do decide to stay with her, the comment I overheard makes me realize how important a prenup is with her. Edit 2. I'm inclined to agree with the comment saying that I should simply end things right now instead of taking the risk with somebody who has shown that my money is a primary interest of theirs. The only thing is, I feel like the best case scenario might be for me to talk over the prenup with her again. I know that would safeguard me, but not necessarily make her less interested in my money. But isn't it natural that someone would appreciate someone who has a good amount of money? Edit 3. Okay, I've had a lot of sense talked into me. I'm still going to have the prenup discussion to see what she's going to say, but I'm ready to pull the trigger on ending things. I love Brianna a lot, so it's a lot easier said than done for me to let her go. I want to know that I gave things a chance. Update. Here's the update that I know a lot of you were waiting for on the story of my fiancé, who I caught telling her friends that my money was the best part of me. Things have come to a close, and I am more than happy about the way they've gone. So the first thing that I needed to do was to talk to Brianna again regarding the prenup. I think it was about a week after we got back from the barbecue that I told her to sit down so that we could have a discussion. I told her that we needed to discuss the prenup situation again, and just like last time, she flared up. I think it was even worse the second time around. She went on again about how it was just a sign that I didn't trust her and that I wasn't rooting for the relationship to work. I tried to shift things to how it was more about protecting my father's hard work. I own a sizable chunk of his company than myself, but she wasn't having it. She kept raging on, and I really did my best to get her to see my angle, but it wasn't working. I asked her whether she would marry me if I said that the prenup was a must. She didn't seem to think about it long before she said that she would strongly reconsider our future together. I think it was at that point that I realized I wasn't going to win her over. I let her know that after the first time I was going to let the prenup go, so I asked her to guess why I was bringing it back up. Understandably, she was clueless on that front, so I told her that I would help her figure it out. I asked her to look back on a discussion that she had with her nurse colleagues when we were at her friend's barbecue. She only said, "We talked about so many things. I don't know what you're talking about. You don't remember laughing and giggling with your friends as you said that my money was the best part of me? You don't remember telling them how you couldn't do a prenup with me because you won't win the jackpot in case we divorce." At that point, it was clear that she remembered what I was talking about because she started to tremble and act extremely anxious. I was waiting for her to confirm or deny what I had said, but she didn't say anything. I prompted her to speak, but she was just looking at me while her hands were absolutely shaking. I don't know why, but that made me laugh, and I think me laughing made her turn on the waterworks. She started to cry and sob, all without saying anything to me about what I had said. At that point, it was starting to piss me off that she had nothing to say, and I wanted a reaction from her, so I let her know that the wedding wasn't going to happen anymore. At that point, she fell to the ground, and I started hearing her mumbling some word like, "please," over and over between all her tears and sniffles. I stood up, went to our room, locked the door, and went to bed. The next morning, she was waiting for me, and she looked like she hadn't slept all night. As soon as she saw me, she came up to me and was being extra touchy, but I shrugged her off. She started to try to explain the context of what I had overheard. She claimed that she was just trying to fit into the whole gossip girl type of vibe, and she didn't mean the things that I had heard her say. She blamed her friends and her colleagues for being bad influences. She claimed that my money was never a part of the reason why she fell in love with me. I believed it was likely true initially, but I feel like she started to love the money more at a point. She said that she'd sign the prenup and it wouldn't be a problem for her. She said all of that, but I honestly didn't have anything to say to her. I took her hand in mine, looked her in the eye tenderly, and then slowly took the engagement ring off her finger. I paid way too much for that to end up in the hands of someone like her. That struck a nerve. She started by crying, but it quickly devolved into cursing me out. She said I was ugly. She said I had no charm. She said my penis was small. She called me gay. She said she had slept with a guy she met at a bar because she felt like it. I really don't know whether I believe that part or not, but it honestly doesn't matter at this point. She said my money was the only good thing about me, and she wished she had been able to milk me more. She basically pulled out every insult that she could think of, and at a point I started to laugh. That was when she began to throw things at me. As much as I wanted to be all stoic and indifferent, she started to toss some pretty dangerous things, so I retreated to the room and locked myself in. I think it was about 2 full hours later when things quieted down and I finally came out. She was gone, but she had trashed the entire place. I was furious, and in that moment, I was sure I had made the right move. I took pictures of everything that I could and retrieved some footage from one of the indoor cameras that I had. After that, I left the house to go and sleep in a hotel because honestly it was absolute chaos, and I didn't even know where to start with the destruction. This is where I decided to start having fun. I went to her Facebook page and her Instagram page, and I looked for the post on each platform where she announced her engagement. Then I drafted a message. "I hate to inform you that the wedding is off, and I am no longer engaged to Brianna." She admitted to just being with me for my money, and when I confronted her about this, she lost her mind and destroyed my house. If you have any questions, ask her, which I posted as a reply to every single comment. She hates looking bad in front of other people, so this part made me feel very satisfied. I then made my own post showing off the destruction that she had caused, as well as some short clips of her trashing the house when she was having her tempered tantrum. I tagged her family, friends, and even the hospital where she works. This last one was for fun, and it will be nice to have a little gossip start about her among colleagues. Her parents tried to call me several times, but I didn't bother picking up. Honestly, it sucks that I have to cut ties with them because they were lovely people, but it is what it is. She called me tens of times after I had done all of this, and the one time I picked up, it was a mix of her crying and threatening to come and kill me for ruining her life. I really don't think anything I did was permanent, so she was just being dramatic. She shouted about how I had humiliated her with the short clips that I posted, and people now call her Brianna of Tarth behind her back because she was acting aggressively in the video. I found that part hilarious. She kept crying about how everyone now looked at her differently. I won't lie that I had a little iota of concern that she would do something crazy because the tantrum she had thrown at home wasn't quite the Brianna I knew. In the end, nothing happened, at least not yet. I called the event planner and told her to cancel everything related to the wedding. That part was heartbreaking for me, I'll admit, but I had to do it. Once that was done, I knew that she and I were done too. The best part for me is the fact that I'm taking her to court to compensate me for destroying my property. I asked her to pay up nicely, but she only called me some unsavory names, so I don't mind putting her through a little more stress just for the fun of it. She's going to have to pay for a lawyer, miss days off work, and hopefully, in the end, having to compensate me for everything that she destroyed, and trust me, it was a lot. As for now, that is still pending, but I have a recording of her being a bull in a china shop, and I've spoken to my lawyer, so there really isn't anything to worry about. She won't be slipping out of this one. There's still a little bit of hurt in my heart, considering that something that I really had my hopes on isn't going to work. But I'm glad I found out the way she saw me sooner than later. I prefer the pain now instead of a lot more pain much later. Anyway, a big thank you to all of you for helping me out, especially with my previous post. I'll be reading all your comments here, so let me know what you think of how I got back at her. Brief update. Here's just a little update for anyone who might be reading this post at this point. I was awarded $987 for all the things that she destroyed in my apartment, including hotel fees because I wasn't able to sleep there and professional cleaning fees because the entire place was a mess. The smile on my face was huge because there I was, taking money from her after our split. I guess she should have been the one with a prenup. Now on to the next story. Story 3. Jealous stepsister Lena stole my family's heirloom that my mother left for my wedding, ruined it for her own dress, and faked a pregnancy to trap her young boyfriend. Here is what I did. My stepsister, Lena, 31F, has been a constant source of annoyance in my life for the past 5 years. Recently, she tried ruining my wedding, and that was the last straw. She had to face the consequences of her actions, so I plotted the perfect plan to get back at her. So, a little bit of backstory before we get into the details. I, 25F, am the eldest child of my parents. I have a younger sister, Josie, 22F, and it was just the 4 of us for a very long time. My father was the most amazing person. Our little family was filled with happiness and laughter for 15 long years, until my father unfortunately passed away after suffering a stroke. Came as a shock to all of us because it was just so unexpected. Josie and I looked up to our dad for almost everything. No matter what, he always had solutions and answers. Now, without him, it was as if we had lost our guiding light. My mother was distraught and overcome with grief after Dad's passing. She went into shock and didn't eat or even speak for days after it happened. Suddenly, it was as if I was responsible for everything. I was only 15, and I remember being so scared and grief-stricken that I cried every night. But I was the one who had to step up and take charge. Josie was too young, and my mother was in no shape to be making any kind of decisions. I was the one who had to plan the funeral, along with my grandparents. I was the one who had to make sure that my mom and sister were okay. I had to make sure that things still ran smoothly, even though I was dealing with my own pain. It seemed impossible at the time to even imagine a life without Dad. But as the days passed by, we found ourselves going back to our normal routines, or as normal as it could get without him. The good thing was that I had an amazingly supportive and caring boyfriend, now husband Leo, 26M, who was by my side through everything. We had known each other as kids, and he was my biggest support and comfort in the days after Dad's passing. I honestly don't think I would have made it through those days without him. Eventually, we fell in love and have been together ever since. I can honestly say, without a trace of doubt, that Leo is not only the love of my life but also my best friend, who was there for me when no one else was. While my love life was blossoming, so was my mother's. I didn't think that she would ever love again, but around 4 years after my dad's passing, she sat Josie and me down and told us that she had been seeing someone for the past year, and she finally felt secure enough in the relationship to tell us about him. To our shock, she told us that she was in a relationship with our former history teacher, Mr. Jones. She told us that Barry, Mr. Jones, was a source of comfort to her during her grief and helped her out during her tough times. She said that she trusted him and did have feelings for him, but at the same time, felt guilty for even thinking about love for anyone else except Dad. The more I saw my mom with Barry, the more I could see just how happy he made her. I hadn't seen her laugh and smile like this in years, and I was thrilled that she could at least regain a little bit of the joy that she once had. Barry was sweet and kind to both my mom as well as to Josie and me, and we all grew very fond of him, especially after seeing the dramatic change he brought about in our mother. Barry had been divorced for over 10 years and shared a daughter, Lena, with his ex-wife. He told us that she was not as close with him after the divorce because his wife won her custody, which prevented her from seeing him often. He was hopeful that Lena would be more involved with him in this new phase of his life with my mother and us, and was excited to introduce us to her. I had seen Lena around when I was in school. She was much older than me and, from what I remember, was one of the most popular girls in our school. She was the typical pretty blonde cheerleader, prom queen, who could get any guy she wanted. She also had the reputation of being a bit of a bully and a mean girl, but we had never actually spoken to each other until our parents got engaged. From what Barry had told me, after graduating, Lena married her boyfriend by the time she was 20 and was now living with him in another city while he pursued his music career. I wanted to make a good first impression on her because, if she was going to be my new sister, I wanted us to be friends instead of having any animosity. Josie and I volunteered to pick up Lena and her husband, Jimmy, from the airport when they arrived for the engagement party. To my surprise, I didn't even recognize Lena at first. She had always been pretty, but now it looked as if she had gone overboard with lip fillers and Botox, giving her an almost plastic-like appearance. She could barely even open her mouth fully to speak. Our initial greeting was pretty cold. Not even a hug or a thank you for picking her up. I tried making small talk with her throughout the journey back home, but she never spoke nor even looked in my direction and stayed on her phone the whole time. The weekend that followed was awkward and uncomfortable, to say the least. Lena seemed pretty uninterested in the whole thing. Barry had gone out of his way and cooked lunch especially for Lena. He made all her favorite dishes. He spent days furnishing up the guest room for her to stay and even made sure that she had everything that she needed. She sent him an email with all her requests, which ranged from a specific type of shampoo to the brand of bread she ate. She didn't say much to her dad at all and barely even greeted him when she saw the lunch that he had worked so hard to cook. She looked disgusted and said that she was vegan now and couldn't even bear the smell of cooked meat. Barry looked disappointed and apologized, saying that he had no idea that she was vegan and offered to cook her something else. She practically gagged and said that her mood was ruined and that she would prefer if we went out to eat instead. I was appalled by her behavior towards her father. As someone who lost her dad, I couldn't fathom how she could take all his efforts for granted. I wanted to snap at her right then and there, but I didn't want to worsen the situation anymore. Reluctantly, we all went to the restaurant, and, surprise, she ordered chicken wings. When I immediately pointed out that she claimed that she was vegan, she came up with the dumbest excuse by saying that she was vegan with the exception of chicken and fish, which still made no sense because Barry had cooked her chicken. At this point, I was fuming. Even Josie and my mom looked extremely uncomfortable. After a very awkward meal, we paid the bill. Lena didn't contribute a single penny, and she declared that she would prefer to stay in a hotel for the remainder of her trip and asked Barry to book a room for her and Jimmy. He looked so disappointed and defeated that I couldn't help but pity him. At the same time, I was furious with Lena, and, despite my mother and Barry trying to calm me down, I exploded. I told Lena, as calmly as I could, about how, ever since she arrived, she had been nothing but rude, dismissive, and disrespectful to not only us but also her own father, who had worked tirelessly to cook her a meal and make sure that she had all of her very specific demands met. That wiped the smug look off her face immediately. I told her that she looked like an idiot, thinking that she was better than the rest of us just because she peaked in high school and, by the looks of it, went down a spiral but still thinks that she is in high school despite being a grown woman. Lena was staring daggers at me. It was clear that she wasn't expecting an outburst like this, but I did have a bit of a temper, and I couldn't stand people being disrespectful for no reason. She tried countering me with weak excuses, saying that I should learn to stay in my lane, but after noticing that even Jimmy looked embarrassed, made a feeble apology to us all and came back home with us. I could tell that it was killing her to listen to me and secretly wished that she would go to a hotel room instead because the more I saw her, the more I disliked her. This was just the beginning of our relationship. It started on a sour note and, through the years, remained sour. 3 years ago, Jimmy and Lena separated because she was caught cheating on him. Unfortunately, she also lost her mother. Lena was in a terrible position and wanted a fresh start and decided to move in with our parents for a while until she could get back on her feet. At this point, I had moved out and was living with Leo while Josie was in college. We helped Lena move in and tried to give her space to grieve. It was during this period that Lena became very attached to my mother. Earlier, Lena's rude attitude rubbed her the wrong way, and they weren't close, but after her mother's passing, my mom began consoling and supporting her, and they began developing a deep relationship. I was happy to see them bond because, after everything that Lena had been through, I was glad that my mom could give her comfort. It was only after this that I started having real conversations with Lena for the first time. A few months after moving in, I went over to Mom's house to spend the evening, and Lena and I ended up having to share a bedroom. I expected us to butt heads as usual, but after drinking a glass of wine together, she began opening up to me like never before. She told me about how her parents' divorce traumatized her, and even though she wanted to be with her dad, her mother won custody and fed her all sorts of lies about him, making her dislike him and not visit him in years. Her mother completely abandoned her in terms of being a parent and was busy going on dates and having relationships with men which never lasted for more than a few months. She was neglected, and this made her act out, party, drink while underage, do drugs, etc. The worst part was that her mother didn't really care about what she did, or who she was hanging out with, because she was too absorbed in her own life. She said that she never saw how a true mother actually was until she saw my mom and how she treated Josie and me. She told me that I was lucky that I had a mother who loved and cared about me because she couldn't relate and she lost the chance of ever mending her relationship with her mom now that she had passed away. This made me understand her a little better. As the months passed by, I noticed that Lena got extremely close with my mom. Like I mentioned before, I initially didn't have a problem with it. I was glad to see them get along, but now it was getting a little annoying. She never let Josie and me go out or even chat with Mom alone. She constantly had to be involved in everything we did together. She would specifically arrange for mom and daughter spa sessions, completely excluding Josie and me from them. My mom did like Lena and went along with her, and even though she didn't like the fact that Lena excluded us and even spoke to her about it, Lena would always pull the "I had an absent mother" card and manipulate my mom and the rest of us too. She slowly started becoming very possessive of her and wanted to be involved in everything. Oh, and another thing, it was very evident that Lena was envious of my relationship with Leo. After her divorce from Jimmy, she tried very hard to get a boyfriend and got into many flings which didn't last long because none of the guys could put up with her demanding behavior. The fact that she couldn't get into a stable relationship, especially when Leo and I were going strong for years, definitely annoyed her. The fact that a pretty, skinny girl like her couldn't get a boyfriend while I, the chubby one, definitely made her jealous. She'd oftentimes comment about how lucky I was to have found someone like Leo and how I should be careful and watch my back because he was a great catch that any girl would want. I am extremely secure in my relationship with Leo. We love each other, and I am sure that he would never do anything to hurt me and didn't have a disloyal bone in his body. Yet, Lena's smug comments always irked me. Moreover, she made Leo very uncomfortable by touching him all the time, sometimes even smacking his butt as a joke and invading his personal space. Whenever I told her that she was being inappropriate, she'd jokingly say that there was nothing to be worried about and that I was just being insecure. It was at these times when I really wondered why I ever felt even an ounce of sympathy for her. Fast forward to last year, and Leo proposes to me. It was magical and I obviously said yes. Wedding preparations went into full swing, and it was an exciting time for all of us. There is a tradition in our family wherein the eldest daughter gets to wear a beautiful necklace on her wedding day. It was sort of a family heirloom that had been passed down through generations. It was nothing fancy, just a simple string of pearls with a beautiful emerald in the center, but it held a lot of sentimental value. My grandma wore it at her wedding and so did my mom, and now it was my turn. I knew that this necklace meant a lot to my mother because, even when we were struggling to make ends meet after my father's passing, my mom refused to part with it. The minute Lena saw the necklace, I could tell that she wanted it. She looked at my mom with all seriousness and told her that, since she was now the eldest daughter, she was the one who had the right to wear the necklace. We all laughed, thinking that she was joking, but she was dead serious and even got offended when she saw that no one was taking her seriously. She began acting like she was just being funny, but I knew her well enough to know that she was not. The months leading up to the wedding were hectic. Leo and I had to balance work with attending all of the appointments for the caterers, the decor, flowers, and clothes. Josie, Mom, Lena, and I went to the bridal boutique to choose my dress. I didn't want Lena there, but she somehow forced her way into it and absolutely ruined my appointment by making terribly rude comments about how chubby and pudgy I looked in almost all the dresses I tried on. I was on the verge of tears because she was ruining one of the best experiences of my life. When I finally found the dress I liked best and felt confident, Lena snidely commented that I could lose a few pounds so that the dress could look less frumpy and suggested that I go on a water fast. This was my last straw, but before I did anything, my mother stood up to Lena and reprimanded her for being so nasty to me. I had never seen her so angry before, and the shock of this outburst was evident on Lena's face. My mom supported me by having the assistants escort Lena out, telling her that she was being of no help and that the only thing she was doing was trying to make me feel bad. My mother was never someone who lost her temper. She was always calm, cool, and collected, but I guess seeing how terrible Lena made me feel pushed her over the edge, and I appreciated her immensely for what she did. After Barry heard about what happened, he too had a few strong words with Lena and then even offered to remove her from the guest list for the wedding if she made me uncomfortable. I should have agreed, but like an idiot, I didn't want the matter to escalate and didn't cut her out. After this, Lena stopped involving herself in the preparations and became subdued and quiet. I didn't have much time to care about what she was doing because I was preoccupied with the wedding. Around 2 months before the wedding, Lena said that she had been dating a guy called Adam for a few months and would appreciate it if he could be her +1 for the wedding. I agreed that, as long as she didn't ruin my wedding, she could bring whomever she wanted. She didn't give me any other details, and I didn't bother asking. Finally, the day of the wedding arrived, and I was a bundle of nerves. The night before, I had made sure to arrange my gown, jewelry, veil, and even my shoes in one of the bedrooms, so that there wouldn't be much hassle the next day. We had a beautiful rehearsal dinner where I met Adam for the first time and was shocked to see that he was only 22. I was expecting someone much older. Lena was all over him, touching him and kissing him to the point where he looked uncomfortable. The next day, with the help of my bridesmaids and mom, I began getting ready for the wedding. Everything was perfect. The weather was great. My dress was beautiful. The cake was amazing. It was too good to be true. We were running short of time, and the priest and guests had arrived. After quickly getting my hair and makeup done, my mother went in to get the finishing touch, the necklace. The only problem was it had vanished. I clearly remembered placing it in a drawer in my room the previous night, but no matter where we searched, the necklace was nowhere to be seen. After pointlessly searching for it everywhere for over an hour, I had to walk down the aisle without it because the guests were getting impatient, and it was getting too dark. I didn't have much time to think about what exactly happened to it because there was so much going on, but I hated the fact that I broke the long tradition of not wearing the necklace at my wedding. To make things worse, at the reception, Lena unexpectedly got down on one knee and asked Adam to marry her. Yeah, I was as surprised as you are. It gets worse. Adam looked terrified. It was clear that he had no intentions of marrying Lena, but then she proceeded to say that she would have liked to propose at a better time and place, but she couldn't because she didn't have much time because of the baby. Lena was pregnant. Everybody gasped in confusion, and I was surprised Adam didn't pass out. Lena told everyone to get ready for a double celebration because she was planning on getting married in a month so that she could still fit into her dream dress. We were all gobsmacked by now. I was sure that Lena had something up her sleeve because I had known her for years now. I knew how she was. She was jealous of my relationship with my husband and mom. She always wanted the attention to be on her. She thrived that way. I knew that somehow my necklace was tied into the story somewhere. My gut told me she was behind it. During my entire honeymoon, I racked my brain trying to find a way to get proof that it was her. And this proof came from an unexpected source. My uncle. He told me that the night before the wedding, He saw Lena sneak out of the room where the necklace was, and he remembered her being very startled when she saw him in the kitchen. At the time, he didn't think much of it, but now that the necklace was missing, he had to tell me. Now I was almost sure that Lena was the culprit, but I needed definitive proof. Luckily, my neighbor is a little paranoid about thefts and has CCTV cameras all over his backyard, and one of them has a pretty good view of my bedroom window. After going through the footage, we saw that the bedroom lights turned on around midnight and, just for a few seconds, I could briefly see Lena's fake platinum blonde hair through the window. Now it was confirmed, and I was going to take revenge. What made me hate her even more was the fact that she was faking her whole pregnancy. I asked her many times if I could accompany her to one of her appointments, but she denied it. She didn't even let Adam go with her. She'd sent us pictures of her ultrasounds, and a simple reverse Google search was proof that she had taken them off the internet. Moreover, I called up the clinic that she claimed to go to for her appointments, and guess what? There was no Lena that had ever visited. I have no clue why she was lying about this whole thing. It was ridiculous. I knew I had to do the right thing and tell Adam. We met up a few days later, and I told him everything. He was furious at the lies and couldn't believe that Lena was trying to trap him. Mostly, he was relieved. He told me that he had only started dating her a few months ago, and it wasn't serious at all. This baby bomb had caught him off guard, and he only accepted her proposal because of the baby. He was obligated to do so. We were both so angry and done with her lies. She had to pay big time. Now you can call me rude, cruel, childish. I don't care. Lena has been ruining my life since I've known her. Stealing this heirloom was the last straw. Her constant need for attention was now becoming dangerous and was harming many people. She had to learn a lesson. Adam and I began to hatch a plan. We decided to let her go on with the wedding. Let her feel as if she were slick and nobody suspected her. I was sure that she was going to wear my necklace at her wedding. She was predictable that way. Once she arrived at the wedding, she found out that nobody showed up because we told them it was a scam. Then Adam would tell her that he knew about the fake pregnancy and her plans to trap him and break up with her on the spot. If I was lucky, she'd have the necklace on her, and I can take it back and cut ties with her once and for all. I told my family about the plan, and they were all surprised by how mean it was. However, when they found out she had stolen the necklace and lied to everyone, they were more than happy to oblige to help her learn a lesson. Even Barry, her own dad, was disgusted. The next few weeks went by in a blur with Lena thinking that she had gotten away scot-free. She didn't let me anywhere near the wedding planning because she said that she wanted it to be a surprise. Even Adam was left in the dark. By now, most people knew about the fake pregnancy and were so disgusted by what she was doing that they didn't want anything to do with her anymore. A day before the wedding, Adam sent me a photo that made my jaw drop. It was a photo of Lena's wedding dress. When I took a closer look, I noticed that Lena had used the gems and pearls from my necklace to make sort of a fancy waistband/belt for her dress. I was outraged. Not only did she steal something so important, she disassembled it and ruined it. She was crazy. The worst thing is she really thought that no one would find out about it. Now I'm not saying that what I did was right. I was definitely no saint. I was petty and I was very vengeful, but if anyone deserved this kind of behavior, it was Lena. On the day of the wedding, I wore my best dress and went to the venue extra early. While Lena was getting her makeup done, I went to the bridal room and took her dress and waited, along with my parents, Leo, Josie, and Adam, for her to show up in the living room. She looked puzzled to see us all there and even more puzzled to see me holding her wedding dress. I told her that we knew everything she was up to, how she stole the necklace, how she lied about her pregnancy, how she fooled not only Adam but all of us. I told her that we knew she was a lying, attention-seeking scamster, and nobody was going to show up at the wedding because they saw her true colors. I even showed her all the proof that we had collected these past few weeks. Now that she was caught, she started coming up with all sorts of excuses and started crying and begging for forgiveness. She said that she was just borrowing the necklace, and she was going to give it back as soon as the wedding was over. Lena had completely ruined the necklace. It wasn't salvageable. I'm sure she thought that we were never going to detect that she had used the jewels this way. She thought we were that stupid. Then she fell to Adam's feet, apologizing for lying about the pregnancy, and begging him to give her another chance. Honestly, it was pathetic seeing a grown woman cry like a toddler. Adam told her that they were done and that he never wanted to see her again. He was so disgusted. I called the cops on her, and I'm not sure what exactly is going to happen. Maybe I am ruthless, but I do think she deserves it because it is all karma for the stupid things she's done her whole life. I had to have the last laugh, and now she's left with the police, with no dress, no husband, and no dignity. I did what I did. Update 1. Wow. This blew up, and I have been getting so much hate from so many of y'all. So many of you are calling me evil, jealous, and all sorts of nasty things and are defending Lena and calling me a witch for destroying her life. Honestly, did you even read this whole thing? How could you possibly be on her side after what she has done to not only me but our whole family as well as Adam? Yes, maybe I could have handled it better, more logically, be the bigger person, but why should I? Why can't I do what I feel is right and give her a taste of her own medicine? I don't think what I've done is even half as bad as the things she's been doing for years. You are entitled to your opinion, but if you really think that Lena was a defenseless, innocent person, I don't know what to tell you. Anyway, we called the cops on her and submitted all the pictures that we had collected. Lena told them that she never stole anything and that she had just borrowed it for her wedding, but I don't think anyone was buying that story. Either way, she was charged with petty theft and will have to return the necklace plus extra cash for the damages caused. In addition to a fine, she wasn't arrested or anything, but she will have to do 3 months of community service. A lot of you were asking whether Adam wanted to get her charged for faking her pregnancy. Technically, I don't think that there are any laws as such. I'm not sure, but Adam didn't want to have anything to do with her. He wanted to get as far away from her as possible and didn't press any charges. Instead, he got a restraining order on her. So yeah, I think a few thousand in community service is a small price to pay for what she did. But at least it's something. Update 2. Hello? It's been a while. Just thought I'd pop in and give a small update since this thread is still active. Our entire family cut ties with her completely. I haven't spoken to her in months, but what I've heard is that she's completed her community service and has plans on moving to another city. She also paid the fine and gave back the necklace in pieces. I don't think there's any hope of salvaging it. All of us have been trying to cope with the roller coaster that was the past few months, but it still seems surreal that any of that even happened in the first place. Now that I think about it, I shouldn't have stooped to her level. I could have given her a taste of her own medicine in a more elegant way, but at the time I was so angry. I only had revenge on my mind. I need to get a handle on my temper before it backfires on me. Anyway, I don't think I want to have anything to do with Lena anymore. I'm much better off without that kind of toxicity in my life. But I hope that she becomes a better person for her own sake and wish her nothing but the best. Update 3. Guys, I was able to find a goldsmith who was pretty confident that he could salvage the pieces of the necklace and try to recreate it. After a long wait, I got it back last week, and it looks great. I mean, it doesn't look exactly the same, but the goldsmith did such a great job at restoring it. I didn't think it could be saved, but I'm so happy that it has so much resemblance to how it originally looked. Now on to the next story. Story 4. Overheard my wife talking to her app on the phone. Later found out she was having threesomes with her ex and his girlfriend. So I told everything to everyone at our family dinner. I was married to my wife for just a year when I found out about her affair. Before Sarah and I married, we were family friends, and our families knew one another. In fact, her mom was a very close friend of my mom, and somehow their relationship continued with us, their children. As a teenager, I had been crushing on Sarah for a while, but after she married her previous husband, what I had for her died down, and I moved on with my life. Unfortunately, 2 years after she was married, she divorced her husband because of his infidelity, and that's when we became close friends. Throughout the time she was dealing with her divorce, I was there to stand by and support her, and in the process we fell in love with each other and I asked her to be my girlfriend. According to her, she said I was nothing like her ex-husband, and she wished she had met me before she got married to him. Sincerely, I loved Sarah so much, and shortly after she was done with her divorce, I asked her to move in with me, being that I had known her for years and wanted us to live together. As of the time Sarah and I started dating, I was not in any relationship and I wanted to settle down, too. I was tired of being alone, and as soon as I asked her to move in with me, she did. We didn't date for so long, we dated for 9 months. And after 9 months of waking up next to her every day, I believed it was time to make things official. We had a small wedding, invited friends and family, and everything was great. Marrying Sarah was like a dream come true, and I treated her with so much love. On her end, Sarah cared for me, cleaned the house, and did all the necessary chores. She was so sweet, and I loved coming home from work to be with her. Even after we married, we continued with our bi-monthly family gathering where our parents and available siblings would come together at my parents' or her parents' house, and we would all eat together like a family. Life was great for us, and we barely had any issues except when I forgot to take out the trash. After Sarah divorced her ex-husband, she told me she was no longer in contact with him, especially since they ended things on bad terms, and I believed her. I had seen how much she had been hurt by him, and I knew it was difficult for her to leave someone she had dated for 4 years and were married for 3 years. And that's why I tried as much as possible to comfort her and encourage her during that time. We didn't have a child or think about having one because Sarah didn't want children, and she preferred we either got a dog or bird whenever she was ready to become a parent, and I was cool with that. I didn't like kids anyway, and I was cool with us owning a pet sometime in the future. Even our parents tried to convince us by telling us all the beautiful things about having kids and why children were important, but we still did not let them get to us. Now that I write this, I'm grateful I didn't let my parents convince me because I'd probably be raising another man's child. So it all happened that one day Sarah and I were in the living room watching a movie together on a Friday night, like we always did, and then I realized I could not find my phone. Not like it was missing. I had this bad habit of dropping my phone in a place I would forget. At first, I searched the couch, the whole living room, but I could not find it, and she didn't bother helping me find it because it wasn't the first or second time it was happening that week. The worst part was that I loved to leave my phone on silent, so even if I called the number, I'd need to go from room to kitchen to bathroom to hear the vibration. After searching for a couple of minutes and I was already frustrated, I asked for Sarah's phone so I could go around the house and listen for the vibration, and she gave it to me. It was a big distraction from the movie we were watching, and since it was a series we were anticipating, she was so engrossed that she didn't even notice when I left. I checked the kitchen, the laundry room, I did laundry just before we watched the movie, the bedroom, and eventually, I found my phone in the bathroom. I left it there after I used the toilet. I was a bit relieved because I had a work meeting in less than 10 minutes, and just as I was about to leave our bedroom, a WhatsApp group chat notification popped on her screen. There was something weird with the group chat name and all the sensual emojis attached to it. Out of curiosity, I opened the group chat to read the message, and at first glance I knew what was going on, but I was wondering what my wife was doing in a group like that. It wasn't until I read the messages that I realized that my wife had secretly been having an affair behind my back. And the most heartbreaking part was that she was cheating on me with her ex-husband and his girlfriend. They said all sorts of nasty things to one another in the group, and from all I gathered, they had been having threesomes. They even had one that week and were already making plans for the next and all the toys they wanted to use to spice things up. Honestly, I stood in shock for almost a minute and tried to wrap my head around what I had just seen. It was shocking to think that we both talked about her ex-husband that same day, and she cussed at him and wished him all the miserable things in the world. I knew I would have to read their messages over and over to be sure I wasn't making things up in my head, so I took screenshots of the messages I saw, took screenshots of her ex-husband and his lover's picture in case she tried to deny it, and I sent them to my number in WhatsApp. Then I marked her messages unread, and I cleared every trace. I could not even confront her because it was a lot to take in that night, and I couldn't sleep the whole night. My head nearly popped open. The following morning, she noticed I was a bit dull and cold toward her, but she believed I would cheer up once we met our family. We were gathering at her parents' house on the second Saturday of the month. When we got to her parents' house, I tried not to ruin the happy moment and waited until it was time for lunch. While we were eating, I asked her if she had seen her ex-husband recently, and the question surprised everyone. She answered with a smile and denied not seeing him since their divorce. My hands were already shaking at that point, and her parents noticed it. I couldn't control my anger anymore and yelled at her to explain the screenshots I saw on her phone when she got my phone and read the messages. Her mouth dropped, and she began to cry immediately. At the same time, I sent all the screenshots to our joint family group chat, and everyone was shocked. I wasn't the only one that was so disappointed. Her parents were so ashamed and disappointed that they yelled at her to explain what I was talking about, and she did nothing but cry. After I exposed her in front of her parents and my parents, I walked out of the house, and she tried to follow me. I left her there, and she did not return home that evening. The following day, I packed all of her stuff and drove it to her parents' house, and I left. She arrived at my house the following week and begged me to forgive her. She even created a small scene as I entered my car and drove out, and I didn't care. Eventually, we divorced, and she has been miserable since then. Also, her infidelity affected the relationship between our families somehow, and my mom is no longer close to her mother like they used to be. It's been 4 years, and I'm glad I didn't let her infidelity hold me back. I'm currently in a relationship with the woman I intend to marry, but we are taking things slow. As for Sarah, she found out her ex-husband was only using her for pleasure, and he didn't even marry his girlfriend. He dumped them both, and since then, she has not been in any relationship. Now on to the next story. Story 5. My wife cheated with a coworker and hit me when I confronted her. Finally, I left her after years of abuse and lies. This is my first post here, but I've been lurking since my first D-Day, April 17, 2021. Only recently have I become more active. A bit more than a year has gone by, and through lots of self-reflection and therapy, I finally built the courage to walk away from my wife, 38M, wife 36F. This is a very weird feeling, one I really don't know how to fully describe. I'm optimistic and scared, calm and anxious, happy and sad. My Fitbit says my heart rate is around 80 BPM, which is about 10 beats higher than usual. So I decided to write this here as a reminder to myself not to give in. I thought making a list of all the crappy things I've had to deal with over the 13 years we've been together, married for almost 8, might keep me on track to follow through with the divorce if I get weak in the future at any point. So here's a list of all the reasons I'm leaving. For my future self. She is an alcoholic. She gets obnoxious, verbally abusive, and violent when she drinks. She cheated on me with an employee that reports to her at work. They had sex at work during working hours, not to mention the hotels they booked. She made secret plans to meet up with an ex-boyfriend using her work cell phone before I stumbled onto the text messages. After forgiving her for cheating on me, I discovered she had booked a hotel in August 2021 during a night I was away. Once confronted, she denied it and gaslit me. A week after I left the house to stay with family, she finally admitted to sleeping with the same coworker again. The one time she agreed to put a tracker on her phone, I discovered she had left the phone at her friend's house and had her friend text me pretending to be her. She claimed she was at Target and simply forgot her phone. She came home drunk in the middle of the day once, saying she was at the gym. After finally agreeing to start a new job and put her AP out of our lives by blocking him on her phone and email, I discovered she was hiding a second cell phone and communicating with him through that device instead. On a night she claimed she wanted a night to herself, she secretly met up with her AP for dinner, claiming she just wanted closure. The same night she stayed at a hotel. Her best friend, who previously coerced her into $5,000 worth of debt and has cheated on her own husband with many partners, has been assisting my wife and her affair and will continue to do so. Luckily, we have no kids since she aborted our child 5 years ago. I can sell the house, make my money, and move on without any strings attached. Don't believe her when she says she will change. She has said this many times, and she never will. She has only gotten smarter in trying to hide her crappy behavior. Get out. Build your own life the way you want it. Just typing all that out makes me question why I stayed as long as I have. Edit. Thank you so much, everyone, for the outpouring of support. Today is kind of a crazy day, as she is being served while at work. I have the day off and I am moving my stuff out at the same time. So while I'd love to respond to everyone, I am on a tight schedule today. Some frequent questions I have been receiving in chat/SL comment messages. No, she does not know she is being served today, but 2 days ago I told her I was pursuing a divorce and wanted her respect. She agreed, albeit after love bombing me and promising she would make changes. I shot down all her attempts. I did not want to report her to HR, and I would advise against anyone else doing so. If I pursued a divorce and she lost her job, I would have been on the hook for alimony. We both make roughly the same annually, so realistically she shouldn't be receiving anything from me. Pasting a comment I left to someone in the comment section to explain why I did not leave after so much. It's not easy to walk away after you've built so much with one person. A lot of this really only came about in the last year and a half, really. She had a drinking problem but was always self-aware of her issues and worked hard to overcome everything. She went a long time without touching alcohol. She was sweet, kind, and nurturing for years, and it felt great to spend my time with someone like that. Once the affair started, she seemed to lean into all her negative behavior, and I just kept giving her chance after chance. And now she's used up all of her chances. The house is in both of our names. I do all the upkeep on the property. I intend on staying in the house to facilitate its sale since she does close to nothing with the house. If she chooses to stay legally, I cannot kick her out, so going full no contact while I deal with this might be tough to do. I am moving my stuff to my father's house today so I can bail and stay there if all fails. Update 1. Thank you so much for the encouragement after my last post detailing the reasons why I finally decided to leave my wife and serve her with divorce papers. It feels good to get over that initial hump, but I know the road ahead is still lengthy and will be filled with many challenges. Ultimately, despite all the rough spots that occurred this past weekend, I'm feeling empowered that I am taking control of my life again. So here is what has transpired since Friday. She comes home from work and is visibly upset and unstable, but trying her best to pretend that nothing happened. She denied ever being served the papers and took note of things of mine that were missing and noted the kitty carrier out. She demanded I put everything back, put the kitty carrier away, that she was going out with a friend, and that I better be home when she gets home. After she left, I packed up the car and went to my father's house. I did not feel safe with her the way she was acting. The Ring doorbell captured her returning home a little after 10 p.m. Then around 11:30 p.m. it captured her again in one of the strangest and most unsettling ways I have ever seen my wife behave. She walked out the front door and stood in the driveway for a moment, then began dancing and singing the chorus of "The Boy Is Mine" by Brandy and Monica. After singing the chorus of the song and a couple more verses, she walked back up the front stoop and tried to tear the Ring doorbell out, but she was unsuccessful and walked back into the house. She was obviously drunk, and I was very satisfied with my decision to leave the house and stay at my father's. I have saved the video and sent it to my attorney. On Saturday morning, her friend picked her up at 5 a.m., as they had plans for a day trip to shop at the outlets. I went home and investigated the house. Luckily, everything seemed all right, and nothing was damaged by her. She came home in the early evening and still pretended that everything was all right and she was never served any papers. I ignored her and stayed to myself on the couch. Eventually, she came and sat down, admitted to receiving the papers, then unleashed a number of different tactics on me to get me to drop the divorce. She threatened, mocked, begged, negotiated, pleaded, love-bombed, and guilt me over the course of 2 to 3 hours, discussing everything. I held firm, laid out my case that I was unhappy and wanted out, that I was tired of being abused by her, lied to, and emotionally tortured. Surprisingly, she admitted to enjoying treating me the way she has, as every time I stayed with her and endured it evidently showed her how much I loved her. I quickly pointed out the dysfunction in that, which she brushed off as being just the way she is and asserting that she will never sign any divorce papers. Things have calmed down. There's obvious tension in the house still, but we are coexisting and keeping things cordial. My attorney has advised that she has seen this plenty of times in her years of being a divorce attorney, and once all her tactics fail and she realizes that the divorce is not going to stop, she will turn to rage and go on the attack, so I'm preparing for that next. This is certainly the start of a very long battle, I'm sure, but I keep thinking of the goal at the end of all this. Me on my own and self-sufficient in my own place, not being tormented any longer. I absolutely cannot wait for that day. Update 2. Many have been reaching out to me asking for an update, so I thought I could give the news on events that have transpired and maybe some of my own personal reflections on everything. Thankfully, things have calmed down. I took the advice of everyone here, my therapist and my attorney, and I left the house. I was hopeful we could coexist and I could stay in my own home, but there was a night where things escalated, and I knew it wouldn't be possible to stay under the same roof as her. I was staying in the guest bedroom at the time. One night she had said something nasty, I forget what. Later on, she knocked on my door lightly. I answered to find her in tears as she offered an apology for her actions. I thanked her and asked that she leave me be. After closing the door, she unleashed a fury of vulgarities at me on the other side of the door, then went downstairs and continued her tirade, effing idiot, I hate you, over and over, among many heinous insults to me and my family. Luckily, there was no sign of impending violence, but I sat in the room above her as she continued cursing and yelling, hoping she would stop. She eventually did. That night, I slept with the door barricaded and made the decision to leave the next day. Once she left for work the next day, I began packing the rest of my things. Luckily, I work from home, so I had time before work and during my lunch break to pack up my car. After work was done, I jumped in my car with one of the cats and went to my father's, where I've been since. It's peaceful here. The house is not occupied most of the time, and many of the rooms were used more for storage. Cleaning out one of the bedrooms upstairs and buying new furniture has been a fun project. The room I am now staying in is quite cozy. For as long as I have been married, I have always wanted a gaming room, and that's what I've been working on turning this room into. I even bought myself a new bed. It's one of those adjustable bases and even has a built-in massage function. I may have gone a little overboard, but I wanted to be comfortable and excited about where I'm living. As of typing this up, I can confirm I'm thrilled to be here. I even got my email confirmation for my Steam Deck, so that was a nice added bonus from Valve. It's as if they knew I was going through a tough time and needed something fun. There has been some communication between us, but very little, since my wife does not clean or really know how to take care of the house. I've been visiting on weekends to check on things and grab any other items I may have left behind. Her tone has definitely changed. She has been begging me to call off the divorce, taking ownership of all things wrong with the marriage, offering to have the open policy I've been asking her for, and swearing that she called everything off with the guy she had an affair with. I'm not buying it. I know this version of my wife as I have seen it many times. Once the dust settles, she will revert back to her old toxic habits. For now, it's nice to hear directly from the source of my heartache that she is actually claiming responsibility for everything she has done, even if that gesture is a facade and short-lived. She is a person with many personal issues that I have taken an active role in assisting with. It's rather astonishing to sit back now and reflect on all the things I've helped her with throughout the years, all the ups and downs. I saw her last Sunday when I stopped at the house. The place is a mess, with empty bottles of wine scattered around. After I arrived at the house, she went into the bathroom to throw up quite loudly. She came out and said she was hungover from drinking the night before. I maintained the gray rock method and didn't engage in any way, which only fueled her sorrow further. You don't even care, she said a few times to me while holding back tears, clearly trying to bait me. She is scrambling to suck me back into being a manipulated toy to play with, and it isn't working. It makes me sad to see her like this, but I also lost my motivation to help her, mainly because I realized that there is nothing I can do for her anymore. Coming to terms with that really does feel refreshing. Sometimes I wonder why I stayed for as long as I did, but I'm content with how things have unfolded and with my decisions. I first found out she was cheating on me in April 2021, then found out she cheated again in August that same year. For many, that would have been enough in itself, but I still stayed. As my therapist said to me a year ago, I wasn't ready to walk away. I am now. I needed to see this through and confirm that the problem was not me. The problem is entirely her, and there is nothing I can do about it. My options are to endure perpetual heartbreak or leave. I chose to leave a year ago. I didn't realize those were the only cards on the table. I thought I could change myself and make the marriage work. I was wrong. My own family tried to coach me, but I needed to realize it myself without being told. That's the important part of leaving a spouse. It has to be your own decision, not someone else's. This is my decision. I am owning it, and I am improving my life little by little. There's a profound reward in learning a vital lesson in life. This hard-won knowledge is precious to personal development. I endured the hollow charade of her crap because I had to learn on my own. I'm not in any way ashamed to admit I stayed throughout all the issues. I'm incredibly proud of myself for finally coming to terms with everything and taking the hard steps to move on with my life, and I'm pursuing all the things I had put off for a long time. I'm making a nice gaming room for myself, exercising a whole heck of a lot. A few years ago, I wrote a book but never pursued being published. I had another book I wanted to write, and I'm pleased to say that I have begun writing it. All these things I have put aside for years and made my marriage a priority. It's so incredibly refreshing to finally indulge in my own interests. I'm moving on, improving myself, and she is drinking herself into misery. I'm focusing on me, and it feels so great. My father's house has a lot of meaning to my family. Many, many memories here. My grandfather came here from Portugal when he was young and purchased the property. He grew up in Portugal, living off the land and growing his own food. If he didn't do that, he didn't eat. So when he came here, he purchased a large piece of land, built a house, built a barn in the backyard, planted crops, and an orchard. This house represented hope for a brighter future. He had horses, cows, goats, chickens, the whole deal. As my father and his siblings grew up, the land became less populated by livestock and more a representation of family and freedom. My uncles began rock bands and converted the horse stables in the barn to practicing spaces for their music. They played among whatever animals were left at the time. When I was born, my father brought me here on the weekends. He and my mother divorced when I was only a few months old but remained cordial. Weekends meant being free on this land with my dad. It was paradise for a child like me. No rules, lots of land to explore and play on, and a great father who made me feel so loved and free. He bought me a dirt bike when I was 8 or 9 years old. I used to ride that bike all over the property, around the barn, on the front lawn. My grandmother used to complain that I was tearing up the grass. She'd come outside as I drove by the front of the house and yell at me to slow down, but I'd scoff at her and ride faster around the house and through the orchard. There were a few nights here when my father would open the window to his upstairs bedroom and climb out on the roof. He'd coax me out with him, and we'd lay on our backs in the middle of the night, engulfed in darkness while staring up at the stars together, talking about traveling the universe and whether there is life somewhere out there. Last night I snuck out through that same window, sat on the roof in my pajamas, looked up at the stars, and cried while pondering life. I cried partly due to sadness but mostly because I felt that freedom and hope I once had when I was a kid in this house. Back then, I was always so incredibly eager for what would come from life. I looked forward to growing up, being a good person, and living an honest, fulfilling life. Those feelings vanished for a long time, but they are slowly emerging from beneath the rubble of a failed marriage. There's hope for a brighter future, and I can't wait to see what comes next. Update 3. There were red flags from the start of us dating. After a month or two, I realized she had an issue with alcohol. She wasn't plastered drunk 24/7, but she would feel compelled to drink at very random times, and she was always a very obnoxious drunk. She had some aggressive incidents, but once everything was over, she would reflect on everything and admit her faults. She was never shy to admit she had an issue, which prompted me to believe she could change, and she did a few times. There were periods where she would be alcohol-free for a year or two, then swear that she could handle it again and begin drinking, and eventually she'd be sneaking alcohol around with her and drinking in the middle of the day again. I forget where I heard this before, but there's a quote that always stood out to me. Love is not solely celebrating the strengths of your partner, but also tolerating their weaknesses. Of course, there's a limit to how much weakness one should truly withstand, but I saw her alcohol issues as something I wanted to help her through. When alcohol wasn't at play, things with her really were beautiful. I believe she wanted to be a good person and overcome her issues. Then she met this guy at work and started sleeping with him. Up until then, she was clean for 2 years and it really put her life together nicely. Once she began cheating, everything changed. She embraced all the destructive impulses she had, like alcohol. I thought she could overcome everything. Maybe she can, but I'm not going to wait around anymore. I'm too exhausted to try anymore. I'm not thinking about dating right now, but after all this is over and I feel ready to, I may try dating again, and if I do, I think I'll avoid alcoholics. That'll be my own individual preference. I'm curious to hear if anyone tracked down the spouse/significant other of the AP and notified them of the infidelity you discovered, and how that turned out for you if you did. I have been debating for quite some time about going through with this, but I've gotten mixed responses from professionals. When my wife and I were trying to reconcile, I brought this up during couples therapy, and our therapist vehemently shot this down, saying it was not my place to do such a thing and that karma would eventually catch up with the AP. Truthfully, when I heard this, I kind of rolled my eyes since I don't really believe in karma, and if karma was legitimate, that would suggest I deserve being cheated on and experiencing this heartbreak. I had also called a private investigator to obtain the contact info of this person, but the PI also refused, saying that these types of actions never end well and I could be sued for harassment, and he, the PI, could also be liable and pulled into a lawsuit. My current therapist gave me a different outlook, saying that if this was important to me, then I should go through with it, but noted it may complicate things for my divorce and that it might be better to wait until after the divorce is finalized. My heart goes out to this poor woman, completely oblivious to the fact that her husband has been cheating on her, and in my view, she has every right to know. I try to think of myself and what I would want if the shoes were flipped. If my wife was cheating and I had no idea, I would absolutely want someone to tell me. Does anyone have any experience with this or any insight? Update 4. I look at myself now and often compare myself to who I was on my first D-Day in April 2021. I still remember the day vividly and how I felt. I had discovered a small bag I had never seen before and curiously thought, where did this come from? I opened it up, and my world shattered. Inside was a collection of post-it notes the AP had given to my wife at work. Have a good night, beautiful. We'll think of you all day. Hey, you look beautiful today. Good morning, beautiful. There were about 10 to 15 post-its in the bag, most with some variation of calling my wife beautiful. I stood in our kitchen breakfast nook, holding the evidence of my wife's affair in my hands, with a pounding in my chest from an overloaded heart that was beating wildly like a frenzied nightclub that had just been set ablaze. I remember the moment so vividly, everything down to the texture of the notes and how they felt on my fingertips. It's all still fresh and distinct over 2 years afterward. I remember my mind racing, desperately trying to make sense of what I was looking at, looking for some excuse to explain it all away. Maybe these are from a female coworker. Women sometimes talk like this to each other, right? I thought, it's sometimes tough for me to relive that defining and earth-shattering moment. Sometimes I think about it and find myself getting angry, but oddly enough, that day triggered a dramatic shift in my life. I'm still piecing things together and rebuilding, but I look at who I am today compared to who I was 2+ years ago, and the two people are completely different from each other. I didn't like who I was then, but I like who I am now. I can't believe how far I've come. Update 5. Every so often, I receive a message from someone here asking for an update. The last time I posted any meaningful update was almost a year ago, which can be found in my post history. My divorce is almost finalized. Both me and my soon-to-be ex-wife have signed all the necessary papers. The papers have been filed with the court, and we are simply awaiting a judge to approve everything. The house has been officially sold as of last week. We are essentially finished. There's nothing more for us to do but wait for a judge to approve the divorce. The path getting to this point was quite tumultuous. My soon-to-be ex-wife behaved like a screaming child that I had to drag through the whole process and force her to finally agree to the proposed stipulation of settlement agreement and to sell the house. But even as she began cooperating with the process, I would still receive those drunk texts begging me to go back to her. And when I refused, she would turn to rage before eventually returning to the love bomb approach to win me back. Her mood would shift quite dramatically in a span of 1 week. She went from texting me, "F you, I'm better than you, I can't wait to be divorced from you," to later handwriting me a letter, taking a picture of that letter, and texting it to me where she referred to me as a great man and the husband of her dreams, but I did not waver. I stood up to my abuser and told her I was not going to allow myself to be treated like this anymore, and it feels damn good to say I did that. There's a recurring thought I have had in this whole process. I often say to myself, behave in a way that you can be proud of in the future. I wanted to look back at this time and be able to say that I did the right thing, despite that being so very hard to do at times and despite having every reason to be angry or frustrated. I think about who I want to be as a person on this earth, and I act and make decisions that align with that vision. I want to be someone that upholds integrity and respect for others, regardless of their behavior, as destructive as it may be at times. This does not mean outright ignoring such behavior but addressing it in a productive way and enforcing boundaries. My therapist quoted Hamlet to me once, and it stood out. It's a line I had heard before but never fully dissected. To thine own self be true. Our response to hardship sets a foundation for who we eventually become as people later in life. My soon-to-be ex-wife did a horrible thing, but I do not see her as a horrible person, as someone I shared many happy moments over many years with. I cannot type this with any hatred in my heart or wish ill will on her. I still love her, always will, and wish her all the happiness in the world. She has many struggles, and I hope she finds a way to overcome them. We left things very peacefully between us after closing on the house. We had lunch together and spoke candidly. We cried together, told each other we loved one another, and wished the other well. For me, it was such a beautiful way to say goodbye. I recall the moment in the parking lot when we hugged, crying as we held each other. I thanked her for being my wife and for giving me so many happy times before the affair. She apologized for her actions and for failing the marriage. We started walking away, holding on to each other for as long as possible until the distance was too much and we had to let go. I know most that experienced betrayal would not have done that, but for me, it was one of the most beautiful moments of my life. It was a perfect way to say goodbye to each other with mutual respect, love, and overall on good terms. As for me, I've been quite busy since deciding to leave. I dropped about 50 pounds, although I put 10 back on since my doctor told me I was a tad too skinny. I had previously been a bit on the heavy side many years ago, so overall I've lost about 90 pounds. Unfortunately, I now have some excess skin on my belly that I'm looking into getting surgically removed, but I still exercise regularly. I recently ran my first race and have a 10K coming up later in September. I joined a kickball league and made lots of new friends through the organization that runs it. We have become close and participate in trivia nights together here and there outside of kickball. I've increased my social circle and even made a close friend through this subreddit that I speak with every day, and it feels so great to be putting myself out there and enjoying new experiences. I have not started dating though, and I'm in no rush for that. I'm not sure when that will come, but I know it will at some point. Truthfully, I'm a bit frightened to start dating, but at the same time, I'm kind of looking forward to it. For the moment, though, I'm still rebuilding my life the way I want it, and I don't want anything to interfere with my goals. Overall, I'm very happy to report back that I'm doing well, and it's because I've put in the hard work to try and be the best version of myself that I've ever been. There are still days where I struggle and feel angry or as though I am grieving, but they are becoming less frequent. If I had stayed, every day would be like that. Leaving was my only option to save myself from becoming a version of myself I never wanted to be. I do hope that this post resonates with those still struggling to move on. I'm always happy to speak with anyone and offer my encouraging insight for those now faced with navigating infidelity. So if you'd like to connect with me, please feel free to shoot me a DM. I will end this post here as it is already quite long, but one last thing. Thank you to everyone who had reached out to me last year or even recently to offer their own advice or just a check-in. This community is absolutely wonderful and served as a valuable resource for me during those dark days. Cheers to a better life. Now on to the next story. Story 6. I'm disabled, and I called my husband a liability after he left our front door open, ruined my car, and streams all day while I take care of our daughter and everything else at 34 degrees Fahrenheit. I have been with my husband, 37M, we'll call him Nathan, for 8 years, ever since our daughter 3F was born. I've been unable to trust Nathan with anything, no matter how small. Background context. When I was 19, after a semi-truck driver fell asleep at the wheel and turned my car into scrap metal with me inside it, I have enough metal holding me together that I light up like a Christmas tree for TSA and am physically impaired, with good days and bad days. I used a portion of my settlement check to buy a house outright and have it retrofitted to accommodate my needs, as I'll eventually require a wheelchair. I work in software development, as it's fun and nobody cares if I work from bed on bad days. My husband has not worked in 5 years, which has been fine until our daughter was born. Between the settlement money, a paid-off house, and my salary, I enjoyed having him here with me. He contributed by handling most of the domestics. We pay for a weekly cleaner with monthly deep cleaning because it gave us more time together. Ever since our daughter was born, it was like a light switch turned off in his head. For our daughter, he would buy the wrong size diapers, not fully mixed bottles, put diapers on backward, leave out poop-covered wipes, and forget to latch cabinets. This past week, he has gone to the store 3 times because he keeps coming home with the wrong size socks and shoes for her. I eventually just ordered the right ones on Amazon. For me, he has tried to help me with my weekly pill organizer several times, only to spill the contents of new medications all over the floor, then not seeing that he didn't get all of them off the floor. He has repeatedly brought me grapefruit juice to take my medications with, a huge no. He has repeatedly forgotten that I can't have dairy and puts milk in my coffee or cheese on a burger. He has broken so many things of mine from being careless. He shattered my laptop because it slipped out of his hand when he tried to pack it for a trip, even after I said I would pack my own electronics. We've lost so many spoons and forks to the disposal. He tried to replace the head gasket in my car and overtorqued the engine bolt, which shattered in the block, and 2 different shops said they couldn't repair it. We ended up getting a new vehicle because a replacement engine would have cost $111,000. A week later, he crashed the new car into the garage door because he thought he'd pressed the brakes, not the accelerator. He wanted to do TikToks and streaming as a hobby. I supported him initially, but I quickly noticed a pattern. Anything regarding our daughter or me, he was sloppy and careless. He never cleans up his own stuff. He would build entire sets to stream or make videos with, leave the garage and leave his brain in the garage. Came to a head 4 nights ago. He streamed himself building a new set for 9 hours straight. Meanwhile, I worked, clocked out early to pick up our daughter from summer camp, cooked and fed both of us, and got her ready for bed. He came out to help put her to bed. I let him know that I needed to get some work done and would be in my office, and I asked him to take the trash out. He says he will. 2 hours later, I left my office, and the house felt really warm. He'd taken the trash out but left our front door partially open and was back in the garage with his game volume really loud. I panicked since our daughter is able to get out of bed, and thankfully she was sound asleep, but she could have easily toddled right out of the house and he wouldn't have noticed. Then I noticed the stovetop burner was on with a small pot on it with nothing inside. I didn't use the stove for cooking that night. I popped my head into the garage and said, "Hey, I need you for a minute." I informed him of the door situation, and he responds, "I thought I locked it." We checked the camera, and no, he did not. I asked about the burner being on, and he said he was planning to make ramen and forgot. He pulled the still hot pot off the burner and put it straight into the sink on top of our daughter's favorite plastic plate, which is now ruined. I'll admit I overreacted and screamed, "What are you doing?" He realized what he'd done and pulls the pot off our daughter's plate and straight onto the countertop. I grab it quickly and run it underwater to cool it down. I tell him I can't tonight. I can't deal with him. I'm taking my meds and going to sleep. He gets a cup from the cupboard and sets it straight onto the burner that had been on. I hit my limit. I started crying. He kept saying that it was fine, things happen, it's just an accident, he's had a rough day from streaming, he's just tired, why am I crying? It's just a cup, we can replace it. The anger hit, and I said, "It's because I have a liability and not a partner." He said, "What does that mean?" I screamed that it's because I can't trust him to do anything, that I'm always having to watch him like a child, always having to bear the cost of his mistakes, that every time I get careless and think I can trust him to be an adult, I'm always the one getting hurt. I then said, "I can't see you as a partner anymore. You're just another liability in my checkbook." He immediately stormed out of the kitchen and went to bed. I called my mom and told her what happened. She thinks it's just stress and offered to take our daughter for a week so we could figure this out without our daughter seeing it. She says it was a harsh thing to call my husband a liability. In the morning, I told my husband that my mom would pick up our daughter from summer camp and offered to watch her for a week. He said okay, and that's the only interaction we've had since. He spends all day in the garage playing games with his friends, making TikToks, and streaming for food. He's been ordering DoorDash and having the person deliver it in the garage. It's been days, and he refuses to be in the same room as me. I've tried messaging him to ask if we can talk or figure out a solution, but he's just left me on read. If I pop into the garage, He ignores me but apologizes to his friends or viewers for the interruption and quickly unmutes his mic when the noise stops. Before the blow-up, I've asked if there was something going on. I tried to gently respond every time he screwed up so our daughter didn't associate mistakes with anger. I asked him to schedule an appointment with a doctor to see if something was going wrong medically. He always said I was overreacting, people make mistakes, and didn't see an issue, even when the same mistakes kept happening. When I tried to get him to understand that it was concerning just how expensive his mistakes were getting, he'd wave it off as it's not like we can't afford it. I love him dearly. I just miss the person he was before we had a child, the one I could trust and rely on. Did I screw this up forever? Was I being too harsh on his mistakes? Am I missing something? Am I the a-hole if her husband is using her money? We do have a shared account for household expenses and bills, but he is using his own money as far as I can see. When he became a stay-at-home husband, I didn't want him to ever feel like he was financially trapped or abused. Also, the thought of my husband having to ask for money or permission to buy things for himself or not being able to buy gifts discreetly felt wrong to me. My paychecks get split, $300 each deposited into separate accounts the other can't see, and the rest is savings. To me, it's his money to save or spend how he wants. I read through all the responses and have removed the allocation to his account. I also removed his name as an authorized user on the bills/expenses account. Before our daughter was born, this did seem the fairest because he was managing the household tasks and maintenance, but I understand everyone's frustration at me since the arrangement is no longer fair or equitable. I can't cancel his card because my name isn't on that account at all, but I have put a stop to this Fridays and all future deposits. Opie if her husband contributed to anything before their daughter's birth and afterward. Opie. Before our daughter was born, he was contributing, and I valued him for it. He cooked most of our meals, did the daily cleaning chores like dishes, wiping counters, cat litter scooping. We did bi-weekly grocery trips and bulk store runs together, but one-offs during the week he would handle. He also helped me hit the ground running with scrambled eggs and coffee in bed so I could take my heart medication. I never had to run the laundry or consider taking the heavier pain meds to get through folding and hanging everything. He still mostly does these, minus breakfast dishes sometimes sit overnight due to his streaming, but I also attribute it to our toddler wanting each part of her meal in a different small bowl. Our dishwasher can only fit so many of the IKEA kids' bowls. He does do the daily things like dishes, scooping cat litter, wiping counters, getting trash out, cleaning random messes that occur, etc., plus laundry and yard work. We pay for a weekly cleaner so we don't run into the issue of deferred cleaning paralysis where small missed things pile up into unwieldy monster tasks and struggling with where to start. The monthly deep clean and organization has been a world of self-care as we navigated having an infant and the transition from infant to toddler. Edit to add. Our daughter started at part-time daycare when she turned 3. Before then, my partner was the primary caretaker, which made the weekly housekeeping much more helpful in not letting things fall to disarray. Opie on her husband's qualities. Opie. He's incredibly creative, and we used to have so much fun working on projects together. He's a modern-day MacGyver. Give him a roll of duct tape, 2 pennies, some foam cardboard, and paint, and he can build beautiful set pieces that could be mistaken for props on Broadway. He learned how to make a mini forge from a flower pot and a makeshift lathe. He practiced until he made the ring he proposed with, complete with my favorite gemstone, blue opal. His smile is infectious, and he tells the best horrible puns and jokes. He took cooking classes to learn how to make my favorite dishes and made his own note card recipe book. He doesn't hesitate to belt out everything from Aqua to Backstreet Boys, Broadway show tunes, Nightwish, and everything in between off-key, but as if the rest of the world isn't there. Play a Michael Jackson song, and he's on the dance floor by the end of the first note. When I gave birth to our daughter, I didn't have hospital food as my first meal. He'd worked out an arrangement with the owner of my favorite restaurant. No matter what time of day or night, as soon as I went into labor, he messaged the restaurant owner, who would prepare my usual faves and personally deliver the meal to the hospital. I had no idea until it arrived, and the smell hit my nose. I cried so many happy tears into my food. I love frogs. He used to take a photo of every frog he'd find in our yard. He designed and vacuformed a sign for our house that is both our favorite animals that says, "Welcome home," If he was out, he'd send me photos of or come home with cute frog-themed things. On my bad pain days where I'm mostly rotting in bed, he would bring me meals on a wooden tray he made. It converts from a carry tray to a bed tray. He got the idea from hospital food trays. He helps me get my socks and shoes on when I just can't quite do it myself. He learned how to do a few styles of updos and how to curl and flatten hair to help me feel pretty on days where I hate the broken body I have. He'll put my hair up, and it brightens my day. That's the person I fell in love with and so deeply miss. Some days he's that person, but more frequently now he's not. Update. Sorry for not being so responsive. Thank you to everyone who gave feedback and suggestions and all of the messages. It's been a week. Before I get into the update, I'm going to answer some repeated questions. Skip ahead a few paragraphs for the actual update. Why does my husband not work? He can easily find employment, but we both agreed that the pay was never worth the toxic environment of his field unless he wanted to start his own business, which he did not. He worked in home repair and renovation. It was gross how his coworkers spoke of and treated women, female customers and coworkers alike. He saw many female coworkers be sexually harassed into quitting. He hated how gross it made him feel when sales and adjusters would take advantage of women. Yes, selling inferior and unnecessary services at a premium is a thing. If he said anything, his hours would get cut until he left. He left one job on the first day because his boss left a screaming voicemail for not selling a refrigerant service to a young black couple who didn't even need refrigerant. Yes, he's got documentation and reported multiple employers to the state labor board and checked back. Nothing was ever done to our knowledge. He's also tried a factory job and a warehouse since leaving the trades. Both heavily penalized him for needing scheduled time off for my medical needs. There's no worker protection here for any of that until FMLA unpaid, which takes a year to be eligible for. Yes, it is a privilege to walk away from a paying job with your middle fingers held high. I have done the same many times, but I'm happy where I'm at right now because it's the opposite of toxic. I'm thriving, and our company has a no penalty, unlimited paid sick/med leave policy that is strictly enforced at all levels of management. Any lead who penalizes people for taking leave gets sacked. A unicorn of a company. Add in a child, and short of finding another unicorn employer who won't penalize him for needing time off for me or our daughter, such as when daycare closed for a week due to an RSV outbreak, it puts him out of the workforce until either I stop working or our child is old enough to not need consistent monitoring. The last reason for this dynamic is that although I'm disabled, my job pays almost double the highest salary he's ever had, with no reduction in pay for needing time off. It doesn't make financial sense for us to switch who the working partner is. Does my husband have a large following or make money from streaming/TikTok? No. His lives have an average of 6 viewers, and his Twitch has 3 followers. When we did our taxes, he didn't get a $1,000, and he showed me that he got all of $6 from TikTok live gifts. Nothing from Twitch. His viewer counts are about the same as the end of last year. Why do we still have a weekly housekeeper and have our daughter in summer camp and part-time daycare? I hate the dynamic of one spouse working a single job for 40 hours a week while the other juggles simultaneous domestic duties, child rearing, care, enrichment, socialization, and essentially being on call 24/7. I would not want those expectations of me and couldn't fathom putting all of it on someone I love and cherish. If my husband did all of the activities and field trips that daycare did, his evenings and weekends would be taken up by domestic duties that I would physically struggle with assisting. The weekly housekeeper helps prevent deferred cleaning paralysis where small missed things pile up into unwieldy monster tasks and struggling with where to start. The monthly deep clean and organization has been a world of self-care as we navigated having an infant and the transition from infant to toddler. The allowance thing, yes, I wanted a dynamic where my husband had his own money even if he was not working a paying job. Maybe I've been on social media too long, but I've read so many stories of non-working spouses, albeit mostly women, being financially abused or unable to leave marriages because they did not have access to money they could save up in private. Should I have stopped it sooner when our dynamic became too unbalanced? Yes, I own that. As for what happens if, when we divorce, the house and settlement balance are in a trust completely separated and, as far as my lawyer can tell, out of his reach. Alimony would be up for a judge to decide, but between my documentation that his licenses/SLTs aren't expired plus my continual medical costs, there's a good chance of not being obligated. Hopefully that answers most or all of the background-related questions. On to the update. Friday, I finished work to the smell of food being cooked. My husband was plating dinner on the table when I left my office. He said he wanted to talk over dinner. And yes, I read the comments on Reddit, and no, I won't delete or change how I write about him just because I know he can see it. I don't know how to describe his reaction, but he said he'd spent the last day reflecting on just how bad it could be, for so many medical diagnosis suggestions being given as reason and justification. He did say that he's not ADHD. His mom was addicted to opioids and Xanax when he was a kid, and she tried to get numerous doctors to have him diagnosed with ADHD. She had him believing he was. He also sought out 2 opinions once he was an adult. He didn't learn about her addiction until his mid-20s. He did seek therapy once he was aware that his mom was trying to use him for pills. He said he was willing to see a psychiatrist one more time, but he doesn't think he's ADHD or autistic at all. He does think he might be depressed, though. If not depressed, he will ask about some of the other medical suggestions if it will ease my worry or rule out a major problem. He did sound genuine in this, but something he said is sticking with me. He said it jokingly and apologized as soon as he saw the hurt in my eyes. That everyone saying there's something wrong in his brain must be onto something since he chose to love and marry someone medically fragile, knowing our life together would be anything but normal. He did also admit that the night he'd left the door open, the pot on, ruined our child's favorite dish and a cup. He drank a little too much on his stream and would monitor that more closely. He said the last few nights he had been filling his wine bottle with grape juice so it looked like he was a jolly drinking Viking but was actually sober. He said he would keep doing that. After dinner, we went out, and he surprised me with seeing the new Deadpool movie. We didn't go to our normal theater because he looked up what each theater had for limited edition popcorn buckets. I now have the baby Deadpool one that holds popcorn and a drink. We spent the next day going over the extent of how our family dynamic changed for the worse, how the little things have added up, how I see change as a part of an apology. If you verbally apologize but repeatedly do the same thing, the apology words are worthless to me, and that he didn't recognize just how frequently he was making the same/similar oopsies. Sunday, we spent talking over short and long-term what needs to change immediately. Him scheduling his own doctor appointments, timelines for expectations. He agreed that replacing or fixing things he caused will no longer come out of our expense account. He will pay it from his allowance account, which we talked about. I did turn deposits back on, but only for $50 per paycheck. He suggested we keep it that way until he's paid back the cost of repairing the garage and car from earlier this year. He said it will take him far longer to undo the cost of destroying the engine to my last vehicle, but that he's going to step up and find ways to make it right. Yes, I see the red flags. Love bombing, not knowing how frequently, despite repeated talks, thinking verbal apologies are the final step in apologizing, and not understanding that repeatedly doing the same problematic thing is the same as never apologizing. And yes, I know he will read this. Do I actually think this is resolved, and we will come out of this as a perfect married couple who stays together until one of us croaks? Not really. Full offense to husband, for now. Is it a potential resolution? Maybe. But my husband is fully aware that he has a lot to make up for, a lot to fix, and a tight schedule to make it happen, and that the lesson for our daughter later in life is either going to be taking real accountability can steer a wayward ship back to course. Taking accountability is the right thing to do even if you don't get the result you wanted, or love alone isn't enough. Edit to add. He finally read the post, so please read between the lines to what I'm actually saying. Last 4 words of the previous 4 paragraphs. If it's not obvious. A comment where Opie replied, "Yes, I'm ready to rumble." There is some truth to his joke, given his ability to work has been impacted due to my medical needs. Neither of you seem very keen on being a partner, and given your take on alimony and money in general, I hope he looks out for his own financial interests. Opie, I'm trying to be a partner. It's why I am supportive and pay for help, housekeeping, part-time daycare that is currently a full-time summer camp, as well as ensure he has his own money to spend how he wants. There is truth that my medical needs impact his ability to work, which would hurt him for alimony because he wouldn't need a unicorn job with unpenalized PTO if we aren't together. Would I still help him land semi-softly on his feet? Most likely. A judge, from what I've been told, would be less likely to obligate it. I wish I could grow a spine and replace the one being held together with duct tape, AP screws, rust, and vibes. I'm well aware that he's 99.9% likely in a panic in the next month if that is going to be a refreshing but temporary change. Sorry, people wrongly dogpiled you previously, but you are quite mistaken. I want to verify that my husband is indeed choosing to suck. Proof that I intend to continue living like this. Bunch of your 2 posts have a much larger following after a week than he does on all of his streaming junk combined. I have a very hard time believing he couldn't keep a job because of how toxic his work environment was. But that's just me. I wasn't going to say it, but you're not wrong. The toxic work environments part is sadly very true. I've seen the evidence he collected and submitted to the labor board, at least before everything went sideways. Things were really nice with him as a house husband. I'm sad he squandered it. I'll be financially able to retire in just a few years, barring my career field suddenly tanking salaries, though. Now on to the next story. Story 7. My best friend became a paranoid conspiracy theorist. My ex accused me of being a CIA secret agent, then showed up at my doorstep and hit my car with a hammer. My husband, 31M, and I, 31F, have known our friend Dylan, 32M, since grade school. Dylan was in our wedding party. He was one of my husband's groomsmen. We've been so close, he's like a brother to us. Dylan was one of the most intelligent, down-to-earth, adventurous people we knew. He studied hard in school to become an engineer, and he worked hard at that for a number of years. He went to Everest and climbed base camp. He started up an app, and it got really big and popular and ended up selling it and making a ton of money. He's traveled the world. Anyways, you get it. He's done really well for himself, and he's been a good friend to my husband and me. Back in 2020, when COVID was really bad and running rampant, Dylan ended up getting laid off. He still had quite a bit of money, so he wasn't really worried about it, but he spent a lot of time alone, like a lot. My husband and I really think that that time alone got to him. Within the year, he became really against COVID restrictions. He'd fight the system. He refused to get his vaccinations and bought into all of the conspiracy theories. Because he didn't get his vaccinations, he couldn't find a job that would accept him because, at the time, a lot of jobs were requiring you to be vaccinated. On top of that, we had our first baby, and we weren't being super strict on visitations, but we preferred people to be vaccinated, so because he wasn't vaccinated, he didn't get to see our firstborn for about a year or so. But during that time, Dylan ended up telling us some wild stories about his life and what was happening. He kept telling us that he could hear this drilling sound in his apartment. He looked all over his apartment for what was causing this sound. He said it drove him nuts when he was trying to sleep because that's when it was the loudest. He said the drilling wasn't all of the time, but usually at strange hours of the night. He finally discovered the location of the noise, and it was right underneath his bed. Then he ended up hearing banging, and the floor was vibrating. He tells us that the woman who lived below him was trying to drill their way up to his apartment through the floor. Then, somehow, he came to the conclusion that this person was trying to kill him. From there, it really escalated, but at the time, we fully believed him. We didn't think anything was wrong with him because he even had video evidence of this drilling sound. Later, it turns out that this person underneath him was just doing some renovations at weird hours of the day because they were a nurse and they worked strange hours. Anyways, he tells us that the apartment he lives in is actually used for trafficking, and he was making a bunch of allegations about the apartment building owner. Then somehow he dragged his dad into it. Yes, this all seems far-fetched, but at the time we fully believed him and supported him. Dylan was terrified. He would come over to our house, and he'd cry in my arms. Before this, I had never seen him cry or show emotion like that. He had always had his head on his shoulders. Once he dragged his dad into it, he texted us one day and said that he was getting committed, and he didn't know when he'd be out. Yes, committed as in one flew over the cuckoo's nest. Straitjacket, padded walls, yeah. But he had this explanation for it. He said that he had found out information on this apartment owner and how it connected to his father, and now these people were trying to silence him, and it was a whole big thing and so much bigger than what we understood. He said he didn't want to tell us too much because it would drag us into it, and he didn't want to endanger us. But when he got out, we allowed him over to tell his story, but he made us power down all of our electronics. Well, at this point, my husband and I are kind of like, not sure how we feel about this, but we don't want to just not be there for him because he's our best friend and we care for him. We want to be able to support him, and parts of his story are still making sense. He's connecting the dots. He's like, these people threw me in the loony bin to shut me up. They gave me some pills to make me lose my mind. And now, at the time, my husband and I were like, wow, yes, we've seen the movies. This checks out. This makes sense. But then we asked ourselves, well, why? Why is Dylan so important? Why would they care about Dylan? He's just one guy. We're sure people who are into dark things deal with little guys all the time and can just brush them off. And then we thought, well, yeah, what better way to deal with a little guy than to make them seem like they're crazy, isolate them, and have them doubt themselves. So time goes on, and Dylan ends up selling his apartment and getting out of the building because he believed people in the building were trying to kill him. He goes to live with his aunt, who is the only person in his family who is talking to him at the time because he's accused his dad of some pretty heavy stuff. And in that time, he gets committed another 2 times. He's in the mental health facility for 30+ days at a time. After a while at his aunt's, he then somehow brings up how his aunt is feeding information to these people who are trying to silence him and kill him, but he doesn't blame her because he said she's probably doing it because they control the money she's getting for her long-term disability. Okay, we guess that could check out. But now my husband and I are sort of like, perhaps there's something wrong with Dylan. Don't ask us why it took us this long to kind of reach this conclusion, but we really wanted to support and believe him. So my husband and I switched gears and just wanted to listen to him. We were like, okay, he just needs someone to talk to, so we'll just listen, but clearly there's something going on with Dylan. So now we're in 2023, March. Dylan comes over to our place to see our second-born. He actually looks good. He's starting to look healthy and more like himself. Before this, he was on some medication that made him gain some weight, which was also unlike him, but medication can't be helped with that sometimes. Medication can be bad for making people gain weight, especially meds that are supposed to help with your mental health. I was on antidepressants a few years back, and it made me gain weight like mad, so I went off of them. Now, I will say that between 2020 and the end of 2022, Dylan was looking rough. I mean, he'd come over to our place and he'd look all sketched out, and his lips and eyes would be twitching, and he just looked like he was on the brink of crying and being emotional all of the time. This was unusual. We used to see Dylan was always the strong guy in our friendship. He'd always be the guy you'd go to who would have all of the answers, so it was odd being on the other side of this. Anyways, he breaks it to us that his sister died of an overdose, and he thinks that she was given something that was laced with something. And in the same conversation, he spills the beans that his sister was schizophrenic. Bingo! There it is. My husband and I's light bulb goes off, and we sort of glance at each other, and suddenly it all makes sense. Then he says that he's moving about 12 hours away to the coast. He said he has to get away from here because he's being watched. He said that he can hear a woman on his phone trying to talk to him when he's talking to someone else. He said he can hear the same woman on the radio when he's driving around listening to music. Then he tells us that there's an older woman at this bar across the street from his aunt's, and these people who were trying to kill him hired her to act as a bartender to drug him and listen to him ranting at the bar. He said she asks him a bunch of questions that suggest she knows what the answers are, but she's just testing him to make sure that he doesn't say anything he shouldn't. My husband and I just sort of nod along with this. So then he tells us that he's moving away to live in this trailer park and live the rest of his days with peace and quiet on the coast. He said he has enough money to live humbly, so we're both like, wow, good for you, man. Get away from all of this BS. Then he's on the coast for a few months and he calls my husband and he's crying and he's saying that he tried to get a little job at this laundromat just for something to do. But the guy at the laundromat was talking to him and he knew too much about Dylan. Dylan was crying on the phone and he said that this TV crew was also trying to film him and they installed cameras in his car and outside his trailer. So my husband is trying to calm him down and he's just listening to him at this point, and Dylan's like, I can't trust anyone. This is my reality, and I can hear this going on, and it just all solidifies exactly what we've been thinking in our hunches. Surely Dylan has schizophrenia too. I mean, a camera crew? Dylan, honey, you need help. Then he ends up getting kicked out of his trailer park for starting a fight with some other resident, and he's forced to come back. But he doesn't have a place to live, so he shacks up in some hotel, but he's not telling us where. He also asked to come over for coffee a few times, but we both said we were busy and that it wasn't a good time with a new baby. And he told us that on his drive back, a camera crew in their cars followed him all the way back, and they ended up staying in the same hotel as him, and they snuck cameras into his room. Well, at this point, we're debating telling his parents because we're not sure if they even know how bad it's getting. We don't hear from him for the longest time. We reach out to him, no answer. We call and leave messages. No answer. So we start to get a little worried until one day we get a group message. But in the group message, Dylan says, "Back off, CIA scumbags. Should never have trusted you." And so my husband and I kind of look at each other like, did he just call us members of the CIA? And then he blasts us on social media and calls us CIA and says that we can't be trusted. And we get people messaging us like, "Is Dylan okay?" And we're like, do we tell them what's been going on? And so we chose not to tell them because we didn't want to slander his name. But we basically said that he's going through some stuff. He's just still stressed about his sister's passing. People bought it, but we sadly ended up having to block him on social media. He was just saying some ruthless stuff about us and literally calling us the C and that we were feeding them information about him. Why? IK. What information would we have on him that we could possibly give to the CIA? And if we even were the CIA, we wouldn't be living in our 3-bedroom little single-family home. I tell you that much. So then, a few weeks after that, we get another message sent from him to the same group chat. This time, he says, if we don't back off, he's going to get our kids taken away. Well, that was that. My husband basically responded and said, "We love you, Dylan, but you need help. Please don't text or call us again." Then Dylan sends another text, and he says, "Watch your backs." And after that, we take screenshots and block him on everything. I then call the police and I tell them what happened. They tell us we did everything right, and if we want, we can file something that would get him committed again because we have reason to believe that he needs some help mentally and needs to speak to someone to get better. So I go down to the courthouse to get that figured out, but right as I come back, I pull up to our house, and I see Dylan at the front door with a hammer in his hand. He starts running up to my SUV, and he's screaming at me, "My babies are in the car. You fed them everything. I told you everything, and I trusted you, and you gave them all of the insider information." Then he goes on about how he's on a game show and he's the best contestant they've had yet, and he's really going to give them a show, and he starts hitting my SUV with a hammer. I'm trying to dial the police and back up at the same time, but he's just following me out of the driveway. Both of my babies are screaming their heads off at this point. I'm shaking and crying and trying to tell the cops where I live and what's going on. Within minutes, they show up and have cornered Dylan at gunpoint, and he's dropped to the grass, and he's laying there while they're putting handcuffs on him. The hammer is on the ground. My windshield is all smashed up, and the hood of my SUV is destroyed. I call my husband, and I tell him what happened. He's literally livid and says not to go anywhere and that he's coming home ASAP. While they're taking Dylan away and putting him into the back of the car, he's screaming at nothing and he's saying, "Are you not entertained? I want my bonus. I want my bonus." And I'm sitting in the SUV trying to soothe my babies, but I'm also bawling at this point, wondering how the heck some guy like Dylan just got to this point and how our mental health facilities fail people like this by not giving them the proper help and aid and offer services that help them get better, and it just ends up putting not only them but other people in danger. The cops asked me if I want to press charges, and I said yes. Killed me to say yes, but I did. That night, I end up calling his mom, and she answers, and we tell her everything that's happened, like lay it on her, and she tells me that I'm not the only one to call her and tell her this. She said that, unfortunately, her and Dylan's dad have done all they can do, and it's really out of their hands. She said that the facilities just don't hold them long enough and don't seem to be helping. She said it can take years for them to figure out the proper medication, and then that only works if he chooses to take the medication, which he hasn't. She just kept apologizing, and she feels so bad, and she said that we should get a restraining order and stay clear of him. She said that we did our best, and he's so lucky to have friends like us who listen and support him. And she starts crying and telling me that she's lost not only her daughter but her son, and it's been so hard. I just feel terrible. Mental health is no joke. We ended up getting a restraining order, and we haven't heard from Dylan since. I mean, that could also be because he's currently committed or something. But yeah, I still feel scared whenever the door rings. I'm scared that it's him. We invested in some more cameras and a heavier-duty security system. It's hard. We feel sad, angry, and all the emotions. He's just not someone we recognize anymore. We miss the old Dylan. We wish there was more we could do, but we have to prioritize the safety of our own family. He's not our responsibility now. Now on to the next story. Story 8. Accidentally found 280 emails proving my wife was cheating on me with my best friend. So I tricked them both into a group dinner, exposed everything, and cleaned them out in the divorce. I, 34M, met my wife, 33F, 10 years ago at a small art gallery in the city. My best friend, let's call him Oliver, was an artist and he was showing a piece there. My wife was there with one of her friends, and I approached her as soon as I saw her. I thought she was the most beautiful woman I'd ever seen, and I had to be with her. My wife's friend, let's call her Mia, actually ended up going home with Oliver that night. Somehow, Oliver and I ended up marrying best friends. We thought it was funny, but it was really perfect for all four of us. We went on double dates together all the time, we took trips together, and we even planned vacations together. The four of us were practically inseparable. My wife was a librarian, so she didn't have much opportunity to travel for work. However, I worked in advertising, and I traveled often to film commercials. We were used to my schedule for the most part. Oliver and Mia both worked from home on a business that I ran together online, so when I was gone, I knew that my wife spent a lot of time with Oliver and Mia. I didn't mind it at all. I was glad that she had somebody there to keep her company. During one of the work trips that I had planned, my computer had an issue with the screen, so I sent it to Geek Squad to have it repaired while I was gone. I took my wife's computer since she rarely used it at home anyway. I got to my hotel room when my plane landed and went to use the computer to check some emails and get some work done. You can always tell when somebody clears a history on something. My wife didn't use the computer a lot, but I knew that she used it. There should have been histories of Christmas gifts she was planning on buying, bookstores, and her personal email accounts. However, the history was completely blank. I was a little curious about why she cleared the history before giving me the computer. Granted, it was her personal computer, and she probably looked things up that she didn't want me to know about. If the shoe were on the other foot, I would have cleared my history before giving my computer to my wife. I didn't give it too much thought after that because I didn't think that my wife would do anything sketchy. However, moments later, I accidentally logged into her email using the saved information that she had instead of using my own. It sounds convenient, but it genuinely was an accident. I was so used to using my credentials that way that I just pressed OK without giving it a second thought. I went to log out of it right away when I realized, but then I saw an email exchange between my wife and Oliver. The message in the inbox was the most recent one out of a 280 email chain. I knew that they were friends, all four of us were, but I had no idea that they were having private conversations with each other. It struck me as very odd. I clicked on it to see what it was, and I was completely broken by what I found. They were having an affair with each other. They were sending each other explicit videos and images through email and planning the times when they would be able to get together. I didn't read through all the messages, but I did look at some of the first ones that they sent to try and figure out when it started. The affair had been going on for 2 years. Anytime I was away from home, Oliver and my wife took that opportunity to be together. They slept together even when I wasn't on a working trip. There were times when my wife would sneak Oliver into the library after it was closed and have sex with him when nobody else was in the building. Early on, there were some emails about possibly bringing me and Mia in on the situation and swinging. It was Oliver who suggested it, but my wife immediately told him that I wouldn't be okay with it. She was right to think that. Oliver thought that Mia might have been convincible, stating that he thought she would be gullible enough to just do what he wanted. I thought that was a horrible thing to say. I ended up converting all of those emails into a PDF and keeping that for myself. I marked the most recent messages unread and logged out to make it seem like I had no idea what was happening. I was going to be away for 3 days working, and I had to focus on what I was doing, or I could risk losing my job. It was absolute torture trying to pretend like nothing was happening when it felt like my entire world was shattering. I had the PDF and I needed to figure out the best way to utilize it. My wife and best friend had both betrayed me, and I wanted to get back at them and make them regret ever crossing me. I mulled over what I could do when I returned, and it finally hit me. It was the middle of summer, and it wasn't anything out of the ordinary to invite Oliver and Mia over for a barbecue and some drinks. I suggested it for the weekend when I got back, and my wife was all for it. They showed up on that Saturday, and everything was normal. While we were eating, I brought up to everyone the possibility that we trade partners for the night. It was a joke. I had no intention of doing that, but I just wanted to see their reactions. Mia was appalled by what I suggested, but noticeably, my wife and Oliver weren't that shocked. Oliver's lack of reaction actually upset me quite a bit. My wife pulled me aside and asked me about why I suggested that, but I just went back to the table, and I told Oliver that it was his idea after all. I quoted what he said in the email and mentioned that he thought that Mia would be gullible and would go for it. She was very confused, so I handed her a couple of pages of the email highlights that I printed out. She read over them, and from the context, she figured out what was happening very quickly. She immediately started screaming at my wife and Oliver about what they did. She was hysterical and upset about everything, and I didn't blame her. I felt the same way when I first found out. Oliver tried to punch me in the face. He accused me of ruining his life. I didn't fight him as much as I wanted to take my anger out on him. I knew that it would only lead to more drama. My wife tried to explain what was happening to me, but nothing she said helped. Basically, she said that she and Oliver had always been attracted to each other, and after a while, they couldn't take it anymore. They ended up sleeping together. She told me that she didn't think monogamy was for her either, which would have been nice to know before I was married to her for 6 years. Mia and I both ended up divorcing them and pretty much taking everything from them in the divorce. They said that they were attracted to each other, but after everything happened, they didn't even try to be together. Oliver desperately tried to get back with Mia because he said that it was a mistake, and she almost gave in to be with him. I was able to talk her out of it. I sent the information about my wife sleeping with Oliver in the library to her boss, and she was fired. Now she lives in a studio apartment in the city. She's reached out to me several times apologizing and suggesting that we give it another try. I think she's realized just how good she had it with me and regrets her choices. Now I'm in a good place now after all of this, and I don't want to look back at any of it. I'm finally ready to put myself back out there and move on from it completely. Now on to the next story. Story 9. I'm getting laid off, and I'm angry at my dad because he won't help me with any money. I will try to explain everything as simply as I can. I am a 32-year-old guy, married to my wife, Emily, who is 30. We have been married for 5 years and have 2 young kids, a 4-year-old son and a 2-year-old daughter. Let me give some more background information. My biological dad wasn't living with me when I was growing up. He took off when I was like 5 years old, and I haven't seen or spoken to him since. My mom met my stepdad, Dave, when I was 8, and they got married when I was 10. Dave was an okay guy, not like a terrible stepdad, but also not someone I was ever really close with, but he provided for me and my mom, and that is what mattered. Presently, I have been really struggling with money problems for the past year or so. I won't go into all the details, but basically, my job situation has been really unstable, with getting laid off twice and having to take temporary, lower-paying gigs. Emily works part-time, but her income alone isn't enough to cover all our expenses. We have taken on a large amount of credit card debt that keeps growing because we can't seem to get ahead of it. It has been really stressful and has put a strain on my marriage because Emily and I keep fighting about money. We have had to take out our savings, and I am constantly anxious about whether I will be able to pay all the bills each month. I am looking for a new, steady job, but it has been tough. So, a couple of weeks ago, Emily suggested that, since I'm having such a hard time financially, why don't I ask my stepdad, Dave, if he can help me out with a loan or something? She pointed out that he is getting older, he is 71 now, and doesn't have any other kids, so she thinks he should want to help take care of his step-grandkids if we are struggling this much. At first, I really didn't want to ask Dave for money. Our relationship has always been pretty shallow, and I didn't think he would want to help me, even if he does have money. But Emily kept insisting and saying I will never know unless I try asking him. She said the worst he could do is say no. So, after going back and forth on it for a while, I decided to go to Dave for help. My mom passed away a few years ago, so I went over to his house alone. I tried to keep things pretty casual at first and made some small talk, asking how he was doing, telling him a little about the kids, etc. Then I took a deep breath and said something like, "So, hey, I actually wanted to talk to you about something kind of important. I have been having a really tough time with money lately, and was wondering if there is any way you might be able to help me out with a loan or anything like that." Dave just looked at me stone-faced and was quiet for a few seconds. Then he said, "You're asking me for money?" "No, absolutely not. I am not just handing out cash, even to family." I tried to explain more about my situation, but he immediately cut me off and said, "I worked damn hard for decades to save up my money, and I will be damned if I'm going to just give it away to someone, even if you are my stepson." I started feeling really embarrassed at this point and angry at the same time. Like, who did he think he was, talking to me like that? So I told him something like, "It wouldn't hurt you to help out your family every once in a while. We are talking about your grandkids here. You must have millions saved up between your pension, retirement funds, etc. alone. It would literally not affect your life at all." Well, that really set him off. Dave stood up and started yelling at me, saying, "Don't you dare try and guilt trip me about my own money. It is my choice what I spend it on and who I give it to. You are the one who got yourself into this mess, not me. Go ask someone else for handouts because you won't get a dime from me." At this point, I could feel my face turning red with anger and embarrassment. So I stood up too and yelled back at him, saying, "You are unbelievable. We are struggling over here, and you won't lift a finger to help out your own step-grandson and granddaughter. You are just a selfish, greedy old man as usual. Don't expect me to come visit you ever again." We kept yelling back and forth like that for a couple more minutes, calling each other names and insulting each other. Basically, it turned into one of those heated, awkward fights you have with family sometimes when tensions get high. Eventually, I just grabbed my coat and walked out of Dave's house. When I got home, Emily could immediately tell something was wrong. I told her the whole story about how Dave reacted when I asked for help, and she looked completely shocked. She said she really thought he would be willing to help us, even if it was just a small loan to get us through this tough time. Since then, things have been super tense between me and Dave. We haven't spoken or visited each other at all. Part of me knows I shouldn't have completely blown up at him and said some of the really harsh things I said, but at the same time, I still feel like he was being a huge, selfish jerk by not even considering helping out his own family when we are in need. Emily has encouraged me multiple times to try apologizing to Dave and seeing if I can smooth things over with him, but another part of me feels like why should I be the one to apologize when he is the one who wouldn't lift a finger to help out his own step-grandkids? Shouldn't he be the one to realize he overreacted and try making amends? I guess at the end of the day, it just really hurts that someone who is supposed to be family would be so unwilling to try helping me out, even a little bit, when I am dealing with such a difficult financial situation, especially when it likely wouldn't be that big of an inconvenience for him. I know having to ask for money from a family member is a little awkward and embarrassing, but I still feel like he should have been a little more understanding and tried to help out in some way. So, Reddit, I want to know, was I being an a-hole for getting so angry and blowing up at my stepdad for refusing to loan me any money or help me out financially while I'm struggling? Or was his reaction the one that was out of line here? I would appreciate any honest opinions because I really don't know what to think anymore. Please let me know if I'm being unreasonable or if my frustration with Dave was justified. Thanks. Date 1. Hey everyone. Thanks for all the replies on my original post about the big fight I had with my stepdad, Dave, after he refused to lend me any money to help out with my financial troubles. I really appreciated seeing the different perspectives, even if a lot of you thought I overreacted a bit. Anyway, I've got another update on this whole situation that is even more crazy. You are not going to believe what happened. So, it has been about a month since the fight between me and Dave. We still hadn't spoken a single word to each other in that time. Every time I thought about reaching out to try to settle things between us, I just got angry again, remembering how selfish and unhelpful he was when I was desperate enough to ask him for help. Meanwhile, my financial situation has continued being really stressful and difficult. I have been applying for new jobs like crazy but haven't had any luck landing something stable yet. I have taken on some temporary gig work and odd jobs here and there to try earning extra cash. But it is not enough to make up for all our expenses, and it feels like I am constantly behind. My wife, Emily, has been so stressed too because of all this money stuff. We argued a couple more times about whether we could make it through another month without dipping more into our savings, which we have already depleted a lot. The worst part is having to cut back and say no to doing any fun activities with our kids because we can't afford it right now. About a week ago, Emily came to me with an idea after one of our arguments about money struggles. She said something like, "Babe, I know this is going to sound crazy after how terribly Dave reacted when you asked him for help, but what if I went and talked to him to see if he would be willing to lend us some money? He is your stepdad, but he has been like a father figure to me too since we have been together for so long. Maybe he would have a different response if I am the one reaching out. At first, I immediately shot down the idea. I reminded Emily how Dave made it crystal clear that he didn't want to lend either of us a penny, no matter what, and I brought up the big fight we had where he berated me and called me names for even having the audacity to ask about borrowing money. But Emily kept pushing it. She was like, I know, but Dave has always been a bit old-fashioned. Maybe he would be more willing to lend money to the wife, the mother of his grandkids, rather than his stepson that he has never been super close with. He doesn't have any kids of his own, so you would think he would want to make sure his grandkids are taken care of. What's the harm in me just asking him really politely and explaining our situation? I didn't want to agree to it at first because I was still so angry about how rudely Dave treated me before, but eventually, I gave in because I knew how desperate we were getting. Emily assured me that, even if he said no, at least we would know we tried every possibility. She said she could make sure to be extra diplomatic and respectful when bringing it up. So, I hesitantly agreed to let Emily go over and talk to Dave. I offered to go with her, but she thought it would be better if she went alone. Emily went over to his house a couple of days later after doing a few hours at her part-time job in the morning. I've got to be honest. As I was sitting at home waiting for her, I didn't have high hopes at all that she would be able to convince Dave to loan us any money. I was expecting her to come home and say he cursed her out and refused, just like he did with me. Part of me almost hoped that's what would happen because then at least I would feel justified that Dave was just a stubbornly unhelpful prick. Well, a few hours went by before I heard Emily pulling into the driveway. When she walked in the door, I could immediately tell from her face that something major must have happened. She had this look like she could hardly believe it herself. So, Emily sits down on the couch and is just sort of stammering, trying to get the words out. She is like, oh my God, James, you are never going to believe what just happened. Dave. He agreed to lend us money. I can't believe it. At this point, I was absolutely stunned. I asked Emily something like, wait, what? Dave is going to lend us money after how he reacted so brutally when I asked him? How much are we talking? Emily replied saying, well, at first I just politely explained to him about how we were behind on all our bills, had gotten behind on rent, had gotten hit with late fees from some creditors, all that kind of stuff. I told him about all the jobs you have been hustling to find something stable and how we were at our wits' end, worried about getting evicted or having our utility shut off. I flat out asked if there was any possibility he could lend us some money as an absolute last resort. At first, he gave me a look like he was going to bite my head off just for bringing it up. But then he actually took a deep breath, and his expression softened a bit. He was quiet for a minute before saying, how much do you need? I couldn't believe my ears, so I told him truthfully that we needed around $5,000 to get us through the next month or two, while we kept trying to get on our feet financially. To my shock, Dave just nodded and said, okay, I can do that. I must have had my mouth hanging open because he gave me kind of a smirk at this point. I was completely dumbfounded listening to Emily recap the conversation. I interrupted her, asking, hold on. You're telling me that Dave, the same guy who berated me and called me horrible names, who seemed so against lending any money at all, he just agreed to hand you $5,000 out of nowhere after he rejected me so harshly? Emily nodded and said, yes, that's exactly what happened. Dave went and grabbed his checkbook, wrote me a check for $5,000 and handed it to me. He said something like, here, take this. Consider it a loan for now, but you don't need to pay me back right away. Just get yourselves back on solid footing. That's what's important. Take your time. I still couldn't believe what I was hearing. It was like Dave was a completely different person compared to when I spoke to him. I asked Emily, did he give any explanation for why he was suddenly being so generous after shutting me down so rudely? This makes no sense. Emily said, well, I think part of it is that he really does see me as like the daughter he never had. He has always had a softer spot for me than you, but he also sort of acknowledged that he was, how did he put it, a hard ass when you asked for help. Dave said something like, I may have come off as an unhelpful person when you asked me about this before. An old man's way of trying to make sure you didn't take anything for granted, I suppose. I'd feel just awful if I didn't help out my own family when they're struggling this badly, grandkids involved and all. At this point, I still hadn't said anything because I was trying to process this unbelievable turn of events. Of all the scenarios I could have imagined, Dave being the one to extend an olive branch and go out of his way to help us out financially was not one of them. So, after Emily finished explaining everything, the first words out of my mouth were, "Oh my God, I can't believe this. This is incredible." I'm simultaneously overjoyed that he's helping us out when we're in such a tough spot, but also just dumbfounded at his total 180 in attitude. Why did it take you going over there for him to have this sudden change of heart? Emily said she didn't have a full explanation, but she thought part of it might be a sexist mentality where Dave was more willing to lend money to a woman out of some old-fashioned sense of being a provider. Emily also wondered if maybe part of Dave's angrier reaction towards me came from residual tensions from when my mom passed away a few years back. I'm not sure if I ever mentioned this, but there was actually a bit of family drama around her death and inheritance. My mom had left most of her assets and belongings to me rather than Dave, which I think irritated him. That's pretty much the totally unexpected update. I went from getting angrily rejected and berated by Dave when I asked for financial help to him handing my wife a check for $5,000. Pretty much no strings attached. To say I have so many mixed emotions is an understatement. Part of me still feels annoyed at how rude and dismissive Dave was when I was the one asking him about lending money, whether it was because of our inheritance squabble, gender role stuff, or just plain dislike towards me. I can't help but feel a little hurt that he had such a cruel reaction versus being more understanding of my situation as his stepson. I'd be lying if I said I wasn't burning with curiosity about the details of what exactly went down between Emily and Dave that made him have such a huge change of heart towards lending us money. What did Emily say or do to loosen those tightly clenched purse strings of Dave's? Was it really just about him being more apt to provide for the wife and mom? Was part of it lingering tensions over my mom's inheritance situation? Did Emily stroke his ego or appeal to him in some other way? I've tried prying a little to get the full scoop out of Emily, but she insists she really doesn't know for sure and was just as shocked as I am about how generous Dave ended up being. I have this gut feeling that she might be leaving something out to avoid inflating tensions between me and Dave any further, but I also realize I should just be grateful rather than demanding answers. Regardless, I really don't know what to make of this whole turn of events. Just a couple of weeks ago, I was ranting and venting on Reddit about what an uncaring, selfish jackass my stepdad was being about not lifting a finger to help out his own grandkids. Now I'm questioning it because here he went and helped us more than I could have imagined. I guess all I can really do is appreciate the fact that Dave did ultimately come through with generosity. If this had happened a month ago, it would have saved me so much stress and hurt feelings. But I'll try not to dwell on that and just focus on doing everything I can to get our finances fully in order now that we have this temporary buffer thanks to Dave's loan. What do you all think about this update? Was I being too harsh in dismissing Dave before, since he did end up lending us a generous amount? Or do you think his reasons for rejecting me but then helping Emily are still rooted in some unfair double standards that are hard to ignore? Any advice on how I should try making amends, or do I just say thank you and move forward? We have reached the end. If you enjoyed this video, please be sure to like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this, and give us your thoughts about the stories in the comments section. Thank you and see you in the next video.